Caitlin's in.
Okay, do we have a clicker?
Caitlin's in. Do we have a clicker, Phil?
I'm gonna click. Ask John where the receiver is for this. Microphone.
Microphone.
Here I go. Okay, there I am. Again, I would like to call the April 7th meeting of the Chico Board of Education to order. And if we could have the flag salute, please. Flags over there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I'd like to announce that Member Dalby has joined us by Zoom. Caitlin, is the volume good for you?
Everything sounds good here. How am I on your end?
Great. I don't know what you
Thank you.
Good evening. Next is announcements. Does anyone have an announcement this evening?
We do have some announcements. We have a student here from Pleasant Valley High School who'd like to celebrate one of the accomplishments at Pleasant Valley, and I'll have her
Okay,
introduce herself.
Just a reminder to speakers to please leave your mask on. The volume is picked up pretty easily on the microphones, so welcome.
All right. Hi, my name is Nana Shalish, and I'm a junior at Pleasant Valley. And I would just like to briefly touch on the progress that we've made in the Equity Alliance and also the PV Saga. So for the Equity Alliance, we've kind of just started with having conversations. And although we're in our first steps, I think that it's going to be a great way to empower students. And I'm really, really happy that we've actually implemented this into the school. I know that there's tons of students that are really excited to see the changes that we're going to make. Also, as for the PV Saga, it's also been a really great outlet for students to voice their opinions and express how they feel. And we came out with our first issue a little bit ago, and we're on our second issue. And it's just one of those things that's going to be really great for our students, because I think that just giving students a voice in general is what's really important to make our school more inclusive and help adults and everybody around campus really recognize what everyone's going through, especially during times like COVID. So yeah, I think that there's great things that are going to come from both of these things. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I did email the board the link to see the saga. They did a fabulous job for their first edition, so
Yes.
congratulations.
Yes, we missed it for years. I waited for it to be placed on my desk in an afternoon presentation of the saga. Great. Okay, any other announcements?
Yeah, I have one more announcement. We're really excited that this Friday, we're going to be hosting a Chico PV football series. In addition to the other sports that are currently competing, we know people have been waiting a long time to see our student athletes out and about, and we're already fielding quite a few inquiries about the safety guidelines for this Friday. And we just want to remind the public that we do need to abide by the California Department of Public Health and Butte County Public Health guidelines, which include a voucher system. Each participant, including coaches, will receive 4 vouchers, and they'll need to come in family unit household. They'll be socially distanced in the bleachers, and we're really excited about the opportunity for all our student athletes, not just football as of right now, and this will be discussed later. We have multiple sports competing. Some seasons have already completed, and we just appreciate the support from the community and from the school board.
Yes, we are getting really good coverage in local news media on the results of our competitions. I really appreciate that. Any further announcements? Okay, our next item is item number 3, the consent calendar. These are items that are routine in nature and can generally be moved in one motion. But if anyone would like to pull an item from the consent calendar for further discussion, please indicate now. That also includes a member of the public. If he would like to have a consent calendar item pulled for further discussion, now would be a time to indicate that. So business services consent calendar. Members, your pleasure. Dr. Kaiser,
I'd like to move the approval of the consent calendar.
is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Tennis.
I'd like to get a quick point of clarification. Would it be appropriate for me to recuse myself due to 3.1.4? The approval of the well at Nord?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
In that case,
you're good.
never mind. No further comments.
Okay, members, since this is our first vote of the night, we'll be doing it by individual member indicating their vote. Member Dalby, let's go first with you.
Caitlin Dalby, aye.
Thank you. Dr. Kaiser? Mr. Tennis?
Tennis, aye.
Lando, aye.
Robinson, aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you, members. Okay, item number 4 is our discussion action calendar. And I'd like to begin, begin with a couple of clarifications so that we're all on the same page as to how we are proceeding and why we got here. Our discussion action calendar tonight represents an item because the Center of Disease Control's changed social distancing guidelines back on the 19th of March. Prior to February 3rd, when the board last acted, there had been many changes throughout the months preceding that board vote. On February 3rd, the board voted to remain with the AM/PM model that it had been in since October, with some modifications through the end of the year. But on March 19th, the CDC changed guidelines for K-12 to 3 feet for student desks and 6 feet for teachers. March 22nd, in consultation with the superintendent, I made a decision to place the item on the April 7th board meeting agenda because without placing it on an agenda, board members could not discuss amongst themselves anything related to that latest decision. So in order to protect us and honor the Brown Act for public discussion and action only by an elected board, I decided to put the item on the April 7th meeting agenda to discuss and have a presentation and answer questions. And administration was asked at that time to do both student and parent surveys and collect other information as deemed necessary by the superintendent and other administration, including site principals. The COTA surveyed teachers and provided results and comments to board members. CSEA surveyed classified staff and provided results and comments to the board and community. Tonight, there is a presentation by staff responding to the many questions raised by the board and others. During this time, the board should fully engage with the presenters, because if a vote to reconsider is not made and passed after public input, There will be no further board discussion, and the matter will remain settled for this school year. The process for reconsideration or reconsidering a previous decision at a later date past that meeting, which was February 3rd, requires unique steps because the decisions, once fully discussed and decided, are meant to be final. And we use in our proceedings the Rosenberg's Rules of Order. Only a member on the prevailing side of the February 3rd vote may make a motion to suspend the rules and consider a reconsideration motion. It must receive a second and a 2/3 majority vote. If the motion to suspend passes, then the item is back on the floor and any member may make a motion as though it were before the body for the first time. Any member, yes.
A point of clarification.
Yes, sir.
So am I, given that I was on the no side, I think I was on the no side of
Yes.
that. Am I able to make a motion to reconsider
No.
the February 3rd decision?
If you made a motion to reconsider, according to our guidelines, you would be declared out of order. If a motion to reconsider is made and on the floor, you may second it, but you may not make the motion to reconsider.
Am I allowed to make comments during any point in this, on this item? If there's not a motion made, will I have any opportunity to speak on this matter?
Our opportunity for comment will be during the presentation. If a motion to reconsider is not successfully passed, there is no discussion. It's on page 6 of our rules that I did forward to you, but that would be the case. Discussion has to be after a successful motion to put something on the floor, and if that has not occurred, there is no discussion. But you may question, any of the things brought before us tonight during the presentation. It's all open for further clarification so that you have a full scope understanding of exactly what we're facing in getting us to the end of the school year. That's the purpose of the presentation, so ask away.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, members, the item will now be turned over to Jay Marchant, Assistant Superintendent, Educational Services. Mr. Marchant.
Thank you, President Robinson. As Ms. Robinson stated before, we wanted to go over our presentation with the new facts that came forward with the new CDC guidelines and the California Public Department of Health guidelines, and we will be giving that presentation tonight. I just want to make sure everybody understands that we are giving basically considerations, not pros or cons, but considerations for the board to think about tonight. And if you have any questions on those considerations that we'll be moving forward, please ask them. And myself or one of my directors will respond to the questions. Okay? All right. Again, on March 19th, the CDC and then the California Department of Public Health changed the language. We changed it from 4 foot to 3 foot to make the consideration. The general consideration says 3 foot distancing. Sorry, go back one more. Sorry, 3 foot distancing for students, and then staff desks at least 6 feet away from the students. Maintaining a minimum of 3 feet between student chairs is strongly recommended. General considerations that we're going to be going over tonight. I'll be going over some of the general considerations, and then Mr. Sullivan, the Director of Elementary, will be going over the elementary considerations, and Mr. John Shepard, the Director of Secondary, will be going over the secondary considerations to think about. General considerations for all settings. 3 foot distancing for all students. 6 foot distancing for all adults. Transportation, adjusting routes and a number of drivers. Other things to consider is nutrition services, lunch delivery, and supervision. Because right now, we do not have students out for lunch, and so we would need to consider what that would look like. Custodial, cleaning cycles revert to pre-COVID one-time daily schedule. Right now, our custodians go, and the elementaries in between, the AM and PM. And then after-school programs. Cards need 1 month to start. So what Cards asked us is said that they would need to go out and recruit. If we changed our child care supervision or after-school programs to after school, right now they do it during the school, they would need to do recruiting, and they believe that they would need about a month to hire the proper people for that. Other things, increase of in-person instruction time. We've gone, that would change from AM, PM to full day. Social emotional support would be more available all day for students versus AM, PM. Scheduling of students is another consideration to think about, and that'll be part of the elementary and secondary's presentation. Student academic supports, tutorials, extended day, etc., to address learning loss and credit recovery, and potentially need to hire additional staff, including paraprofessional staffs. Yes, Mr. Tennis.
Talk about paraprofessional staff. What is that?
That would be more on the classified side. We probably most likely would have to hire more supervision, campus supervisors, yard duty aides, to help us with supervision to make sure everybody's following the guidelines. Possible more aides for the classrooms. Right now they're being pulled for workday supervision and other type of programs, and so we would need to take a look at what we would need to add to make sure that we can go back full time.
I see that social emotional support is one of the goals.
Mm-hmm.
Has there been discussion about hiring additional counseling staff?
Yes. On our last board meeting, when we went over the ESLA dollars, the federal dollars, the state dollars, the board approved for us to add another half-time counselor on every elementary school. We've also have grant money to hire another half-time wellness counselor on every high school. And we have some more consideration in the budget for you guys to look at tonight about adding more counseling supports at the secondary level.
So a half-time would be theoretically one counselor to
At
split.
every elementary. Right now they have a half-time.
So about secondary, did you say secondary or high school?
Secondary, right now every junior high and high school have the regular counseling, which goes to the 400 to 1. But we started about a year and a half, 2 years ago, wellness counselors. We added a half-time for every, first we started with the high schools, then last year we added a half-time for every junior high. Now we're gonna add, so everybody can have a full-time on their campus.
So it'd be one person, it wouldn't be?
One person for wellness,
Uh-huh.
if they can develop wellness centers. Mhm.
Thank you.
Mhm. All right. Sure,
Mr.
go ahead.
Marchand, I'm going to check it with Board Member Dalby to make sure that she's able to hear the presentation and that she has her volume on so we can hear her if she wants to jump in. Will that work for you, Member Dalby?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, at this time, I'm going to ask Mr. Sullivan to come up to the mic and go over elementary considerations.
Good evening. So some of the considerations that are pretty elementary focused that we've been talking about, if the board were to choose to come back full-time this year, if every student came back full-time, we really wouldn't have to change any classes. There'd be very minimal change, minimal disruption. If we, kind of the second bullet, if we talk about having options for families to stay online or kind of go with Zoom-based options or some of those kinds of things, that's where some changes and student changes would have to happen to accommodate that. And it sounds simple, but it's a little complex. I'll give you one example of what that may look like. If you think of a teacher right now that has a morning in-person class and an afternoon Zoom class, so maybe they have 15 students in the morning and 10 students on Zoom with them in the afternoon. If all 10 of those Zoom students wanted to stay on Zoom, we would have to take those 15 students potentially that are with that teacher in person and find another teacher for them to match up with. Or vice versa, we would have to take those 10 Zoom-based students and find another option with Zoom or Oak Bridge for those 10 to stay in that in the online situation for them also. So, questions? Yes.
Please. Oh, Kathy, you want to, Dr. Kaiser, you want to go ahead?
Thank you. We had one estimate back in February, but then I saw some figures today or yesterday. So what is our estimate about the number of students at each level, elementary and secondary, that would have to undergo a change in class and/or teacher?
We asked the principals to actually call and touch base, either they did or staff did, and kind of walk through the possibilities, because it's really a hard, there's a lot
Yeah.
of what-if questions.
Yeah.
So they tried to walk through kind of the what-if possibilities with families. So they called almost 1,000 folks between all the 12 elementary schools. And there were about 100 answers that were very definitive, like, we do not want to come back, we've got family health reasons, et cetera, et cetera. They were very desiring to stay online. The other, about another 300 and some were non-responsive or didn't kind of connect with them, or indicated they would rather not real definitively, but pretty neutral or not. The other ones were interested in coming back, so about half were interested. So to answer your question, Kathy, at least 100 would get changed, and potentially up to 485, which was kind of the number that we didn't hear back from or were not wanting to change. And it might even kind of, this is that what-if kind of thing with it also. So it might even go a little bit more than that, depending on how many other students were in that class, if we had to change a teacher to a Zoom-based class also.
And that is the same logic for the secondary. I thought they had.
I think secondary is a little different situation. I think they're more kind of, I'll let Mr. Shepard share that, though.
Yeah, thank you. So secondary is a little different in that if we locked people into the schedule they're in now, right, or not the schedule, the delivery method they're in now. So if they're online, they'd stay online. If they're in person, they would stay in person. If we lock them in, we have approximately 115 sections that are 35 students or higher. And that's significant in that at 3-foot spacing, when the A and the B students come together into one section that's higher than 35, there's a potential for there to be too many students in some of the classrooms, the average classrooms that we have in the district. So those students would then need to be rescheduled, and there's a potential for them to be rescheduled in 6 periods.
Thanks. Ted, I have a couple of questions about the elementary slide, if you
Sure.
don't mind. So if all students return in person, no class changes will be necessary.
Correct.
This entails combining the PM groups and the AM groups.
Right.
Are we in any danger of maxing out class sizes when we do that?
Their class sizes would be bigger, certainly, but we could fit within the distancing. I've gone around and talked to all the principals, and we actually taken a couple classes and measured with a 3-foot distancing in place. And there's a couple classes where they may have a trouble fitting, and we talked about if that were to come to pass, we would have to maybe hire another teacher for that site because they have another classroom. But there's I think 2 classes that we've had some questions about whether they could all fit right now.
I'm sorry, one point of privilege real fast. Is there any way for the audio folks, I'm getting an echo here, and it's a little hard to hear what the speakers are saying.
Sorry, maybe am I too close?
That might be a little better.
Okay.
Thank you. My concern is that I have heard from some teachers, and I'm sure you have too, that combining these two separate groups, the AM and the PM cohorts, that might have very different skill levels or personalities as a class, is going to be it's going to be effectively a fourth first day of school in a lot of ways, and then having to establish a classroom culture in blending these two groups is going to take away a lot of times that would otherwise be used for instruction. Have you heard these concerns, and is it something that you're at all worried about?
I've heard them. I think anytime you have a significant class change, like what you're referencing, it is a restart, and it is kind of a reconnection of the students in that class and kind of a reestablishment of all those kinds of things.
And so if we have 485 students or families who have said they would like to stay online, then it's unlikely there won't really be no class changes, right? Because the only way we get the no class changes is if everyone comes back.
Correct.
Okay.
So, Mr. Lando, an example of would that be, let's just say there's 3 third-grade classes on one site. All three of them have students in the AM in person, let's say 15, 15, and 15. And then they have 10, 12, and 13 each online. One of those teachers most likely would have to go online full, and then that teacher's 15 that had come in person would most likely have to move to those other two teachers' classes.
Yeah, so odds are that unless we simply axe the online option for anybody, we are going to see some students moving teachers.
Yes, only other way if we could find teachers this late in the school year to hire to teach online model this late in the school year. That would be the only other option that we would have. And again, that's a rough example of, that's if you're asking if those 485, we were going to have to find we'd have to move teachers into teaching full online.
I hear you. I see this, the first bullet here is if all students return in person, no class changes. But
Exactly.
I just want to make sure everyone knows the reality of this is that happening, the odds of that happening are very slim, and there probably will be some class changes regardless.
Correct. Once again, we've had families that were very desiring to stay online, and they shared that with us.
Mr. Tennis?
So for clarification, Mr. Sullivan, you wrote in a note to us, there could be between 100 and 485 teacher changes for the elementary students.
Class changes for students, yeah. Class changes for students. Yeah, meaning those students would change teachers, yes.
So how many total elementary students are there in the system?
A little over 5,000.
5,000.
5,000, uh-huh.
So we could have as few as 100 class changes,
Correct.
but then for the balance of all those students, they would not be displaced in this way.
Correct, if they agree to come back like that, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes,
In input that I've had from elementary and secondary both, but especially elementary, the impact of combining just a few kids with another cohort of kids that they were not with earlier in the year is significant. And I repeatedly got input that it is such a significant culture change and a re-education of how that class is to function, who gets along with whom, how to pull out your small groups by accommodating need levels, even though the teacher may have some previous experience with the students because they had them in either AM or PM, that once you put the cohort together, the dynamics change significantly. I mean, this was not a minimal impact. I also heard from, she is a speech and language specialist in the district who indicated that to reschedule the time and place for assisting the students that are right now having assistance from a speech and language therapist to get help with their language skills so that they can access the curriculum, that vulnerable population of student is particularly susceptible to being negatively impacted by that kind of a change, and goes into great detail about the amount of time and trust that is built up with these very vulnerable children that are struggling with those types of disabilities in order to stay up with their class cohorts. Do you see this? I'm not going to ask you that question because it's impossible, I think, to know if in 2 to 3 weeks, can you make it better?
Yeah,
So that the period of time left before the end of the school year evens out. And how do you account for that loss in that 2 to 3 weeks when we only have 7 left? I'm editorializing rather than asking a question, so I'll shut up.
and I do think each student is so unique with how they react to change, and I do think some would flow with it pretty smoothly. I think others it would be really difficult for also. They really are very unique with how they react to some of those kinds of situational changes. Yeah,
Mr. Tennis.
I want to confirm one thing, but it sounds like with respect to the number of students who could be experiencing a teacher change, we might be talking about 2% of our student population. If I take 100 divided by 5,000, I think wouldn't want to do some bad math. That's 2%. I mean, that's not a very big representation of our student body on the elementary level, if I may editorialize rather than ask a question for just one moment. Thank you.
So a third bullet down, one of the considerations elementary principals have been talking about is just what recesses would look like and how do we schedule and kind of look at our space and how do we use it efficiently, effectively so that we can maintain distancing. And another big issue that really we've been talking about is teacher supervision, expectations before and after school with student supervision. And one of the areas for a lot of discussion that came up was us like having lots of students on campus before school. If you watch a typical elementary school, you will see students starting to arrive at 7:15, 7:30 potentially, and typically they are kind of supervised in a designated area or two. And we, depending on some of the circumstances with distancing and things, we may not be able to do that in our current format or how we've done it pre-COVID before. So we'd probably have to do something different with kind of admitting onto campus before school and make some adjustments there so that we could have students all coming on at the same time, potentially, and going into classrooms. We talked about a lot of different possibilities, but we couldn't do things where typically you would see a lot of students go in the cafeteria and be there together with maybe 200 students in the cafeteria. We couldn't do things like that before school and meet the social distancing requirements. We'd have to adjust to kind of do as far as supervision before school. Same kind of situations with lunch spaces and protocols. What a lunchroom looks like. If you've never watched a lunchroom during the school day, you see a lot of students filtering through, and you see a lot of students that are much closer typically than 3 feet, pre-COVID kinds of things. So we would have to do some significant adjustments, and nutrition services has been very helpful and given us some good ideas on what we could do to kind of meet those requirements, and even kind of spacing out lunch on the campus and looking at other opportunities there to move forward with something like that if we wanted to also. And last one, as Mr. Marchant mentioned, we would certainly have to be doing some additional hiring of staff to supervise. If we are spreading students out during lunchtime, we're going to have more space to kind of supervise and cover for it also. So we want to start hiring process sooner than later and make sure we could have enough people to supervise all those students as they're kind of spread throughout the campus and as well. Yes.
Sorry, Madam President,
Yes.
I just ruminating on what you said a bit ago. I want to get clarification on a concern I think that maybe you have about making this change.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it'll be difficult for some children to adapt to a larger cohort or a different cohort of children. Is that in essence what you said?
Yes.
What % of the elementary school parents, because we did not survey elementary school students, did we?
No.
Okay. What % of the elementary school parents want to return to full-time in-person?
I'm going to look at Mr. Karras and see if I do not remember that exact percentage off the top of my head, but I think Mr. Karras might. John, can you pull that up? So we can share the survey results with you here.
About 76.4%.
There were definitely a lot of interest from elementary parents.
And that was of 1/3 responding.
Parents of elementary, so
I,
that's combined. It's a few slides down from that. Okay, so more than 3/4 of those surveyed want their kid back in full-time. So I just,
The ones responding.
That's incorrect.
the ones that responded. I think I said that, actually.
1/3
You said of those
responding.
surveyed.
Okay, sorry, you're right. Okay, of those who responded, thank you. I would make the point that I think that parents are extremely frazzled right now. And I think that for me, we don't know conclusively, but I'd say a huge chunk of the people who did not participate would elect to send their child to full-time in-person school if given the opportunity. And I just know that from having been in touch with many, many stressed-out families who weren't able to participate in this survey for those reasons. But, I mean, I'm sure that we're living in an imperfect world, and there are going to be some children who would have difficulty similar to what you're describing.
And
But-
please, I was pulling off of the data presented by, and she said that I could use her name. It's our speech and language specialist, Callie Vernell.
Uh-huh.
It was what she, I believe you got a copy of her letter as well.
Yeah.
So it's me pulling from her information, not, don't use me as the source. I'm not the
Right.
specialist.
But even in that case, we're talking about a sliver of our elementary student population.
That's your interpretation.
So
Dr. Kaiser?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remind all of us that we have a legal as well as ethical responsibility to groups that require additional services. But I was going to ask you, Ted, and there is some kind of a sound thing because we all kind of had a little bit where you weren't real clear.
Okay.
I don't mean what you said, but I mean hearing. So when you said if you've been in an elementary cafeteria, yeah, it's like somebody stirred up a pot of ants. They're all over the place.
Good description.
You know, throwing food in the garbage can just so they can get out to recess quicker. So what would have to be the time framework of having food presented and somebody watching the kids, and how many spaces?
What we started talking with nutrition services was doing more of a grab-and-go kind of option, where a class may walk down to the cafeteria. They would have kind of sack lunch style things lined up for them. Nutrition services could kind of verify, just walking through very quickly, and then students would go to different parts of the campus, because we can't fit 300 students in a cafeteria, 250 students in a cafeteria like is happening typically. So we would be using parts of the campus and kind of we've looked at adding additional seating space in, some of those kinds of things. But students during lunchtime, instead of sitting in a couple small confined spaces, would be spread kind of throughout campus, different places where it would hopefully be comfortable for them. But also, that's where we need to add some supervision in then also.
Yeah, so you would have to have a lot more campus supervision in that context.
Yep.
What's the anticipation of the time framework of how long that
Like would lunch
feeding of
last?
students and bringing them back in the classroom would last?
I
Okay,
believe
we've
we
not ro-
have Vincent Cero
Yeah, I don't
online
think-
if we want to. Hey, Vince, do you want to
Oh,
talk
okay.
along those lines?
Yeah, good.
At least I was told he was online.
While we're waiting for Vince, though, Dr. Kaiser, I think, I don't think we need longer time periods for lunch. I think nutrition services was comfortable kind of adjusting. So if that more of a grab and go kind of thing, they can get through quicker and pick up lunch. I think there's Vince.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Go ahead, Vince.
Go ahead, will you repeat the question again? It kind of breaks up and I heard part of it. Repeat it for me one more time, please.
So the query was, as we look at, having to keep the number of kids getting food at one time and then going to separate areas to eat and coming back, what would be the estimated time framework that would be consumed by, quote unquote, feeding them lunch? And some schools,
Well,
of course, is feeding them breakfast too.
Right. And I think that in the last couple of weeks working with Ed Services that we've come up with lots of different options for how we can get them through as far as coming in classroom groups and having more of a controlled flow to it and still being able to get that done in the amount of time that's allocated for lunch. It would just take a little bit more planning and coordination, but I think in the timeline, we have plenty of time to get that done.
Well, I thought we saw some estimates about start times and finish times. Or what? You mean like at 7:30 you could get them all fed breakfast and then at 8:10 they be in class?
Yes.
Thank you, Vince.
Yes, I'm sorry. And then at lunchtime, the same thing is they would be able to come down through and pick up their meals and then head to designated areas to eat.
Thank you, Vince.
You're welcome.
Let's see, I asked of classified personnel, Mr. Cole, about hiring of more classified lunch supervision personnel. It was hard to interpret the note from him. Maybe somebody may have spoken in person. Are we set up
Mr. Cole,
to
I
be able
believe,
to
is
fill
present.
those positions?
He's outside at the door. They're going to go get him right now.
Ah, okay.
As we're going out to grab him, President Robinson, would you like me to go through the secondary considerations? as well?
Yes, go
Okay.
ahead.
So we talked about the first bullet, and we do have some administrators here after we're finished with some general and elementary and secondary considerations to also provide some information. We'll get to those slides in a second. And as we said, there are approximately 115 sections, and we did remove from this, this number some of these sections that are already considered or usually oversized. For example, our band sections, they have waivers for those sections to be larger. So we did reduce the total number of sections for the aggregate total here. As Director Sullivan explained, we do need to be thinking about how we're going to socially distance our students within confined spaces. Obviously, with the weather getting better, it's not quite as much of a concern knowing that if it is raining and they are inside, they need to still be 6 feet away while eating their breakfast or lunch. It's not a 3-foot separation. We are trying to wrap our mind around ensuring that the communication between students and their teachers continues in some situations, and if they are back in person, they obviously would be seeing their teacher every day. So there's some, as Assistant Superintendent Marchant explained, we're not providing pros and cons, we're just trying to provide considerations. We are getting into the testing season. We have multiple assessments. We've already started with some of our standardized testing. We have advanced placement testing starting. We have international baccalaureate testing starting. And then we have cumulative testing starting. So we're getting into that season. So we would need to be considering pacing if we were to move students back into the classrooms and the scheduling for student curriculum. And then, as you can see here at the bottom, if any of the requests for changes become available, we'd have to consider individually how we would address those if the mandate was not that you stay in the current model you're in. So, Mr. Sullivan, do you want to introduce? Oh, Mr. Cole.
David Cole is here, I think. President Robinson, to answer questions.
David, let me ask my question again. As we're looking at how to manage the lunch cohorts as they, classroom in, classroom out kind of thing, where we may have students in a number of different locations, it seems as though we would need more lunch and campus supervisor type positions. Do you feel that we have an adequate number on our current eligibility lists that are available, that we could accommodate hiring additional positions?
Well, I think there's a couple of issues there. We certainly could start further recruitments for eligibility lists for our school aides and things.
We can't hear you.
I'm sorry. We could certainly increase the number of recruitments for school aides, but we've been talking with the union regarding specifically that issue in terms of lunch, before and after school, some of the additional cafeteria breaks and things. And there's been discussions about increasing the hours of the employees that are currently working on a per-site basis, and working with the union to say if we have an IP, instructional para, that they have time, that we'd extend their times as well to cover those periods.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions of Mr. Cole, Mr. Tennis?
I want to make an observation. I can barely hear what people are saying from
Yeah.
the podium out there, and I don't think it's anyone's fault. I liked the old policy for this where we could hear people, and that was when we did not have speakers wear a mask when they were at that podium there. So I just want to throw that out there.
Is there anything we can do with the sound quality and volume at the speaker's podium? Because it is difficult to hear.
Mr. Cole, I do actually have a question for you. I had a social engagement, you could say, with a high-level representative of the CUTA bargaining team recently. And that person made a point to me that the CUTA has basically followed the lead of the school board in everything that has transpired over the last year. And as far as I know, that's correct, and there's been, I guess what we would call labor peace between the direction of the school board and the CUTA. Can you confirm that?
I think actually Jim Hanlon would probably be the best person to answer that. He deals directly with CTA, where I'm more with CSEA.
Okay.
Mr.
Yes,
Hanlon?
I would definitely confirm that. If for much of the school year, only about 12% of the school districts in California have been open, and we've been in that 12%. And I attribute that directly to our relationship with both unions. It was never a conversation about whether or not they would agree to open. It was how do we open and what are the issues we need to deal with in order to open. So from my perspective, they've been a full partner in opening the schools for AM/PM when most of the schools in the state have been closed or online only.
This person, who I won't name, they didn't say that I couldn't, but they represented to me during this conversation and said I could quote them, to say that similarly, if we decide to go back full-time in person right now, this spring, that there would be labor peace in that context and that there would not be any pushback from the union. I hope I'm not misrepresenting that person, but basically, they would follow the lead and the direction of the board.
Yeah, as I said, we've negotiated with them in good faith, and they in return have negotiated in good faith. We in fact have MOUs for online, AM/PM, and in full day person. So we've had those ready to go depending on the board's decisions since fall. We had those in place before we opened on October 19th. So we went through those MOUs fairly quickly and reached agreement. So, and from that perspective, with both unions, we have agreements in place no matter what decision the board makes.
So would you characterize it as a green light to go back to full-time in person, Mr. Hanlon?
I would say that we have agreements with both unions, regardless of what decision the board makes to go. Yes.
We approved all of those MOUs at the last board meeting. And I remember specifically Mr. Moretti making a statement at one of the meetings when a similar question was asked. And he said that the position of CUTA is that the board decides and CUTA will implement to the best of their abilities, just as Mr. Hanlon said. They take direction from the board. Yes.
I'm just wondering if Mr. Moretti is with us and if he has anything to add to that.
I'd just like to repeat what Jim said. Back in the summer, we knew that there were three choices we were looking at, and we recognized the authorities board to decide which learning model we're in. And we negotiated the factors that need to be decided for any of those three models.
I'm sorry, am I having back spasms? Tom.
Thank you. I actually wanted to take this conversation back to what Jay was talking about a moment ago. I hope that's all right. But just, you mentioned something about 115 sections. Can we back up one slide? All right, thank you very much. I was wondering about, when you're saying we lock in everybody in the model they're in now, does that include students who are not in one of the kind of traditional models? Like, I'm thinking of one student who's taking 5 classes online and then comes on site for just one course.
They would still just come on.
They'd still be in the exact same situation?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, Dr. Kaiser?
I'd like to move to go to full-time in the start of the fall semester 2021.
Point of order.
Dr. Kaiser, I don't believe that is part of the agendized item, and it is on the board's agenda for the next meeting.
Okay.
I'm hesitant to approve that as being in order, since, the Brown Act requires full disclosure of our anticipated actions. So I'm sorry, but my decision would be to rule it out of order. Okay. Ms. Dalby, did you have a point?
I just called a point of order. We're not in a, you did not ask for motions for the.
Right, we are not at the point where we would be asking for motion, since we have yet to have any public input on this informational item. What I'd like to do is move through to the next part of the component and continue to allow our board members to ask questions. Mr. Tennis?
I don't know if there's some later moment when I should ask this question or yes, state this concern about the presentation. But I don't hear a lot of differentiation between junior high and high school when talking about the, the possibility of going back full-time. Now, I'm aware that there's a lot of high school students who have responded to our survey.
I see you, Caitlin. We'll bring you in next.
I feel that it's highly detrimental for the junior high students to remain out of full-time in-person school. Are you treating those equally, in your analysis? Are you assuming that the situation for junior high students is identical to that of high schoolers when it comes to the prospect of, and how their schedules will be affected?
There are certainly nuances for each level. When we've been creating these or suggesting these considerations, we are grouping through 6 through 12 because of the basic scheduling and the format of the day. There are also staffing considerations that are 6-12. So when we're looking at the entirety for general considerations, and then trying to disaggregate those by grade level, I can certainly answer questions related to the specific to middle school or specific to secondary. But when we're looking at it through a staffing lens and a scheduling lens and a social emotional support lens, we do group them 6-12.
And we do have administrators from elementary, junior high, and high school here to answer questions from the board that are very specific to those individual grade levels as well. So,
Ms. Dalby, you're next.
Yeah, so on that last slide, I kind of thought maybe it was going to be asked, and maybe this was clarified verbally, but it's talking about sections where there's more students than there can be fit in the classroom. Do we have an estimate on the number of actual students who would have schedule or roster changes, either at the middle and high school level or just generally in secondary?
I just want to reinforce these are approximations, but if we were to do the math, 35 times 115, those students could have, each of the students in those sections could have up to 6 schedule changes based on the complexity of their schedule, their pathway. It would just depend specifically on the student's schedule.
Also, Mr. Shepard, I just want to make sure we understand that the 115 that we're looking at possibly at 35 or larger, that does not include on bringing any of our online students back onto campus that are full online, correct?
Correct.
Unlike the elementary where we're telling parents that they could come back into the classrooms because we have space for them, that is not at the same level for secondary.
Dr. Kaiser?
In response to the query about the distinctions between our middle schools, 6th through 8th, and our high schools, we have a number of students who are accelerated in the middle school area, correct? They are taking classes that are more advanced. So I think that, as you noted, this is way, way more complex than saying, okay, here's a 5th grade class. A student might be, let's say, 7th or 8th grade in English, but 7th in English, but 8th grade in math, and maybe even stepping further ahead than that. So that's part of the AP. They can take AP in middle school classes, and so this becomes, it makes it far, far more complex. We just can't, because to deny a student who's put all this time into an accelerated course that they couldn't stay in it because, quote unquote, they're the wrong grade, that would be a severe loss.
The pathway consideration would definitely have the most impact on the scheduling, what pathway each student was on.
But again, under considerations, if the class sizes at the AM, PM, or at a certain lower size, kids would not have to change schedules.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure that's understood.
Okay, we ready to move on to, we have administration here to,
I'm sorry, Member Dalby has another question?
Yeah, that last statement just prompted a real quick question. Just can I clarify at the elementary level, though, that there's a significant number of the kids who are online that need to stay online who would likely have a teacher change, and so therefore for the last 33 days of school, depending on when this would take effect, they would be in a new online class environment with a new teacher?
That's true. That is a possibility, yes. And I would say majority of them possibly would have a different online teacher, yes.
And how many is that again? I'm sorry.
Could be anywhere, like we talked about, between 100 and 495. We had a solid 100 say that they would stay online, and between 300 and
It's about
395
yeah.
are saying that they would prefer online or did not respond to multiple phone calls from our schools.
So then with the parent survey at the elementary level, there was a really large portion that didn't respond to the survey. So if we were to talk in the total number of parents who the survey was sent to, what's the percent breakdown at that point? Because you guys said you gave us a number. You're in my video. You gave a number that was like 70%, I don't have the number in front of me, of parents that they wanted to go back to full time, but that's not really accurate if there was a large portion who actually didn't respond to the survey at all. So I guess I was just kind of curious if we saw those numbers broken down, like the total number of parents the survey went to, and then the percentage of the total number of parents the survey went to breakdown, and what percentage didn't. I saw the number of what percentage didn't respond, just to have a clear picture of where parents are at. We had a math teacher who had emailed their concern about how the numbers are being displayed.
So if we have 5,000 students and we had 38% of the families do the survey, and then 78% of those families wanted to come back, that would be 1,480 of our families saying that they want to come back in person out of the people that were surveyed.
I just found Member Dalby, I just found the recap of the survey, and it said 33% of the parents responded that were sent surveys.
For elementary, 38.7% responded. Parent
That is-
survey results, elementary, participation 38.7%.
Yeah, that's what I was
Okay.
referencing, the 38%.
If I may.
Did that help? Yes, Mr. Landau?
So I think, just to make sure I'm understanding what Ms. Dalby is saying correctly, if we look at the entire, and again, one of our PV math teachers broke this down very succinctly in an email, of the elementary parents, the whole breakdown is 61% didn't respond, 29.6% would like to go back to full-day instruction, and 7.7% would like to stay in the model they're in, and 1.4% said they had no preference. So the overwhelming majority simply didn't respond, but 29.6 responded in the affirmative that they would like to go back full-time.
Of those that respond.
Yeah, no, of the entire population.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that is really unfair. I mean, the reason that they didn't, if I may, continue with this line of reasoning, respond is because you had, I mean, you can't lump them all together. They're not identical situations, obviously, but you have to go track down your student ID number or your student ID numbers if you have multiple children. Parents are afraid, they're frazzled, they're stressed. Okay, the school system is not there for them. We are not providing the education and the hours of care that we used to and that our society has evolved to expect and have. And so I look at this huge pie piece of the among the people who did participate, you've got 76.4% want to go back. To look at the people who didn't respond and jump through those hoops, which we have got a lot of survey fatigue, I think, over the last year too, because there's been a lot of these surveys given out. When I look at that, Board Member Lando and others, I see a bunch of, at their wits' end, frazzled parents in families that are incredibly stressed out and need the services that only we can provide, and we're being paid untold tens and hundreds of millions of dollars to provide those services, and we're not doing it. That's what I see when I look at this non-participation rate.
If I may,
Mr. Landau?
thank you.
Yeah, please, no applause. Mr. Landau?
I just want to caution anyone from extrapolating from incomplete data. We have the data we have. To ascribe motives to people who didn't answer survey questions either way is an easy way for us to allow our own biases and wishes to come into play. Let's use the data we've got and not try and make guesses about why people did or didn't respond.
I would add that we all got many emails throughout the last number of months about where parents are, and a number, especially this last week, from students. And I see a representation of all of the issues that we have before us and all of the things that we have in a consideration. We're all represented in the input that we are getting from our community on a very broad-based input platform. And so I too, as Mr. Landau indicates, am not going to speculate about what the people wanted that didn't respond to the survey.
Okay, we have Mr. Sullivan here to introduce his principals.
So we have Mr. Weaver from McManus, and we have Mrs. Fuentes from Parkview, just in case there's any questions you guys might have, kind of from a principal perspective view. So they are here to answer questions for you.
Good evening. I'm Heather Cifuentes, principal at Parkview.
Good evening. I'm Chris Weaver from McManus.
Do you have any questions?
Yes, Principal Weaver.
Yes.
I had, again, indications from some of your, not yours specifically, but elementary support personnel, that the smaller class sizes and the ability to easily schedule the supports for the smaller class sizes was actually providing some good outcomes for students that were significantly below grade level when we started back in October, and that they were seeing good outcomes for bringing these students up to grade level. And I'm going to attribute a lot of it to the smaller class size, because those of us in education know that the smaller the class size, the better performance of the students. It's just the way it works. And in California, unfortunately, they don't fund for those small class sizes. But the AMPM has given us a window into the benefits of smaller class sizes. What is your perspective on the impact of smaller class sizes on students that may be achieving below grade level?
I most certainly think small class sizes are ideal for students. In addition to the regular classroom time, we have over 25 tutoring groups at even smaller levels taking place, and so we are seeing growth. There's definitely some achievement gaps, but we are seeing some promising growth.
Dr. Kaiser?
Okay, I wasn't sure. All right. So one of the aspects of this is, we said that we were looking at advantages and challenges. So between the two of you, you both have very different programs. I had an interesting discussion with mine the other day about trees making oxygen. And for a second grader, that's, yeah, all right. So what do you see as the challenges that you would have if you were going to be back together? And again, it would be for 6 weeks, is that 7 weeks? Okay, that doesn't count testing though. So anyway, you both run very good, interesting programs. What do you see as your challenges?
So currently, I'm working out some recess schedules, some aid schedules, lunch schedules, and so the complexities are real. And as far as safety goes, that's our number one concern. So we just want to make sure that the decisions we're making are supporting safety and they're not expedient.
And I would just add, we've lived a complex year this year, so I think we've been problem solvers. I mean, our educators, I commend them for the work they've done. I was reflecting on how they've persevered through things too.
Yeah.
It's one of the only professions that physically has changed through the course of this. So I think that the challenges of change, like you mentioned, from one program to another is always a change for students, parents, staff. But I think that we've proven that anything that comes our way, we're able to do, and our ability to provide the safety, we're able to make that happen as needed for our students.
Board Member Dalby, did you have your hand up?
I did. You kind of touched on my question for the most part, but I'm curious and concerned about something that was brought up in our public comment emails about losing the current intervention programs at the elementary level that are in place now. So I'm wondering what the on-site leadership perspective is of losing that intervention time if we were to change our instructional day model again at this point in the year.
Yeah, so in the event if we change instructional models, our tutoring services will no longer take place before school or during or in the middle of AM, PM. It'll take place after school, and certainly the number of groups will decrease.
Thank you. Any other question yet? Okay, Mr. Shepherd, do you want to proceed?
Thank you. We have Principal McKay from Bidwell here.
I'm sorry, can I back up for the elementary folks?
Yeah.
I apologize for taking my time. I thought Mr. Tennis was waiting to say something, and I wanted to give him an opportunity to do that. I just wanted to double check, and I'm not, I think this was answered earlier, but will there be a longer amount of time needed for testing if we, in the AMPM model versus the full day instructional model? Like, will you need more days?
No, because they give us the model of the instructional, the minutes per test. So we've kind of, our testing schedule would remain the same amount of minutes.
That's what I thought. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Shepherd?
Okay, we have Principal McKay from Bidwell Junior High School, and then he'll be followed by Mr. Williams from Chico High School.
Good evening, board members and district administration. My name is David McCam, the principal of Bidwell Junior High School, and I don't have a significant amount of information to add that's different than what we've heard already tonight. So rather than belabor other points, happy to answer any questions from a junior high school perspective. And I would like to go on record, if I may make just one opinion, that working with my colleagues, Pedro and Jessica at Chico Junior and Marsh, and their teams has been as good as you can ask for during these challenging times. I can speak for Bidwell. Our staff has been can-do, go-getters, student-centered from day one, and I really appreciate them. I want to thank them publicly. And while I don't work as closely with Marsh and Chico Junior staff, I'm sure that Pedro and Jessica would say the same thing. So just appreciate the teachers and the support staff, registrars, classified, custodial, everybody for pitching in on behalf of our kids during this difficult season. Does anybody have any questions for a junior high, from a junior high point of view?
Dr. Kaiser, do you intend on re-asking your what to do with the advancing students?
Well, yeah, I was gonna, I mean, the issue is like advantages and disadvantages, so we just heard the drop in the tutoring groups. I've had contact from students and from parents really being concerned about their students who are in more advanced classes losing that option. So I would ask that question.
In junior high, the way we have it structured, I don't think that you would have a significant impact there for students taking advanced classes. One of the main ways that students advance in junior high is through math, and we capitalize on the Oak Bridge program for students to accelerate in math, and they would be able to do that whether we went back full day or not.
Does Oak Bridge uses Edgenuity, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
Which is not a very popular learning tool. Is that not correct?
Well, it depends on who you ask, sir. The kids I'm thinking of that are wanting to accelerate in math, it works for them. But I've definitely fielded my share of concerns from parents as well, but not from those accelerating students.
Mr. Lando?
Yeah, thank you. Hi.
Hello.
First of all, thank you. As someone who's on a middle school campus all the time, man, it's rough out there right now. So thank you so much for everything you're doing. I think Mr. Terrence brought up a really important point, which is that junior high students are developmentally different from high school students in a lot of ways, and they kind of need to be eked out. Do you see a lot of differences, or is there anything that you see that we haven't addressed in terms of how the needs, either emotionally, mentally, academically, socially, for your kids are different than what we've discussed in terms of overall secondary or the high school?
It's a great question, and I definitely appreciate the consideration for the uniqueness that is the junior high school age, kind of hybrid elementary and high school, all in one compact, energetic little body. And they certainly are unique. To me, the most heartbreaking aspect of this situation are the students who have to be online, and under the current models that we're discussing would stay online regardless. They struggle disproportionately, and the parents with whom I speak that have the most heartbreaking situations are ones that are forced really to stay online. And so I think at the junior high age in particular, where they are still dependent on their parents, but increasingly drawn towards their peers, just not being on campus is really a hard thing for them. And it's just not the same tuning in through Zoom. Although we have experienced doubling or more in our clubs, that we're now, with the loosening restrictions, able to begin to meet in person a little bit, observing all guidelines, of course, in between the cohorts, and that's something that would change or would continue if we went all day. Again, we're doing that right now with AM, PM. Also, considerations, they're very hands-on, and so with 400 students on campus, I can't guarantee that there's a ton of social distancing going on during the unstructured times, although we try. And so it would definitely be a challenge with 800 students on campus with having all that energy there. But thank you.
Thank you.
It's kind of maybe unfortunate for you that this question's occurring to me while you are at the podium, but I guess you could say I have an agenda. So I'm going to go ahead and ask my question to you, sir. How do these miracle worker schools all around Chico pull it off? How is it that these guys out in Durham and, out in the countryside and in our surrounding areas manage to get everybody in there to have in-person school right now? And only Chico is left here with this hybrid model.
I feel like that's a rhetorical question, as I have not been on any of those campuses and I'm not familiar with those logistics. The intent behind my responses are to provide a factual, operational perspective of what we would look like in a return to all day, without trying to lean one way or the other or imply one thing or another. So I'm trying to just give you the facts. Make an interpretation about schools that I don't know about. I don't think that would be responsible on my part.
Thank you.
Respectfully, sir.
Any other questions for Mr. McKay? Mr. Shepherd?
Okay, we're going to turn things over to Doug
Thank you,
Williams.
Dave.
Yeah,
Thank you.
from Chico High School.
Hello, board and community and district employees. I'm Mr. Williams, the principal of Chico High School. I'd like to echo what my colleagues have stated already before me, that I really appreciate the teamwork, not only of the teachers, but the paraprofessionals, all the people on campus, janitors, coaches, food personnel. People have been through a lot of changes this year and have really risen to the top. I'd like to give a shout out to my colleagues at PV and also at Fairview, because we're still continuing our work with moving forward with sports, with AP courses. I just got some good news about a couple students who were accepted into the scholarship program at Stanford. And so life has been moving on for a lot of our students, even though they have been struggling with a very difficult year. But successes are out there and are happening, and there are struggles out there. So I just want to say thank you to everybody for kind of running a race that is difficult, but continuing to put in effort. So at this time, do you have any questions of me?
Dr. Kaiser?
So, Doug, I wanted to say that I have really, really appreciated the efforts that your staff have made around the emotional support and mental health for the students at your school and for your staff. You've gone through some extremely traumatic times, and I haven't heard anything but very positive comments about the Zoom meeting you had for that. So it's never easy when it happens, but I think you guys have made a heroic response. I do have to say that when it's pick up and drop off time, quite a few students don't have their mask on outside the gates. And so I don't know that we've even discussed the option of whether students would be leaving campus for lunch. I haven't even heard that brought up, so I don't know.
The plan would be to continue with pre-COVID bell schedules, which would include students leaving campus at lunch, for lunch.
So would you like to know the number of seconds that they go before their masks come off?
Having a senior in high school, I can only imagine.
Yeah, so I do think that everyone in our town basically has to make a personal decision on how they're going to deal with requirements that are put forth, whether in buildings, parking lots, or schools. I am very proud though of our students and our staff. I will tell you that when they walk in the gates, they're masked. If they're not, we have extra masks for them. And I think if you ask the teachers, because they're the eyes and ears of the school on a minute-by-minute basis, that the kids are very receptive in the rooms. I haven't had one issue with a student being sent to the office or having a campus supervisor called to a room to have a discussion with a kid about why they need a mask on. So even though I know our students don't like it and it's uncomfortable for them, or they may be feeling it's time to stop, they have not showed that type of disrespect to the program that we're running. So that's 2,000 high school students. So I don't say that lightly.
And you're not,
On Friday night, yeah, I think the best team will win.
Mr. Landau?
Thank you. I was really heartened to hear your comment about the students in the Stanford Scholarship Program. I know that a worry for many families has been what the last 2 years will do to students who are looking towards college. And I'm not sure if this is a question for you or for some of the other people in the administration. Have we seen a significant difference in terms of percentage of students applying or getting early responses or being in process for moving to colleges?
I can only use the few students that I know, and I can only use the input from our preparation. Both the high schools have scholarship nights that will be occurring in the next 3 to 4 weeks. And the number of recipients of scholarships is equal to what we've had before, and the number of letters that are going out to people or in terms of what schools are getting into is equivalent. I think what a lot of people are deciding, my own family and child as well, are the colleges going to be open? Is it worth paying the tuition to go to a larger university if you're going to be online? So I think those type of questions are happening in every household. I have 2 children in college too, so I think that's going on with everybody in terms of where they're going to go. But in terms of acceptance rates, where our kids are going, I believe the success rates are still out there. Whether or not they choose to do that is something that I don't know at this point.
That's really good to hear. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Williams?
I'll just add a clarification that what the university has seen and what a number of universities have seen is somewhat a drop in enrollment. But a lot of that gets conditioned by whether there's housing available and what kind of housing it's going to be. So Chico State's going to be 50% on campus. I think that Butte's going to be close to that. So I think as more traditional views of college activities open up, we'll probably see a return. But right now, nationally, it is down. Not the university saying no, but a lot of people deciding that they can't handle doing online.
I would like to add one more thing that I think is a good piece of information for the board as well. First of all, I'm going to speak for PV and Chico High School right now. It's just glorious to see our kids back doing activities, and I want you to know in the last probably 4.5 to 5 weeks that the amount of soft social skill or extracurricular activities that are occurring on our campus have dramatically ramped up. So I know we're often talking about the learning loss or learning gap, and we all want to get back to full-time as soon as we can, but I want you to know for students, what they really want to have happen is happening at a more rapid pace and a more normal pace at this time. And as the restrictions from the county in terms of their color tiers adjust, I know Mr. Shepard and our ADs meet weekly to decide exactly we have to change protocols daily in terms of the amount of vouchers we're going to give parents and stuff. So I really think that our coaches and all our kids have been practicing, and also our theater and music groups, all our extracurricular activities have really hung in there and are really reaping the benefits of that. I also would say that I can't speak for PV because I don't know their testing schedule. Each school designs its own testing schedule. But I do know that our testing schedule, depending on what the state decides, with AP and SBAC testing, we will be going into a 2.5, or with makeup, possibly a 3-week adjusted AM/PM testing cycle as as 2 to 3 of the remaining 7 weeks. So whether or not we come back or don't come back, we will have another schedule change in the next 3 weeks that will put us into a alternative day testing schedule that will last for about 2 weeks to 12 days, and then we'll go back to whatever schedule you decide, and then we'll have a final schedule as well. So I just want to let you know that in the gap that we have left, there could be potentially 3 additional schedule changes for kids within a 7 to 8 week period. We'll do whatever you guys want us to do, though. I think our staff is ready. Registrars, counselors, whatever you need.
Mr. Tennis?
Thank you, Mr. Williams, for being here. I met with a group of students on Monday who believe that the state of mental health on your campus in particular, but both the high schools, is not good. How do you feel the state of mental health is right now among students at your school, and what are the major factors that contribute to that?
Yeah, I noticed that I believe there were some members of the board, Mr. Tennis, I think you're one of them, that thank you very much, by the way, because you didn't have to do that, for attending a training that through the school district, we were able to get Mr. Collins, an expert in mental health and mental health training, and his work has been really great because it's about providing people with the resources and how to move through it. I think the mental health question is tricky because you can use mental health as something that's pertinent to the individual. So there are some people that are doing very successful right now and others that are struggling, but I don't know how many people are struggling in a normal environment compared to a non-normal environment, so I don't have data to compare. And I also don't know if making an additional change is going to contribute to more ill mental health, or is it going to improve mental health, because that's going to be dependent upon the individual and their mental health. So even though I might be able to predict the strength of the mental health of my campus, I'd be guessing, but I can't predict what decision is going to affect someone's mental health in the positive or the negative. Again, I think if I did that, not to quote Mr. McKay, but I would be remiss to make comments on something that I don't have information on, nor am I expert on.
Do you think we should triple or quadruple the amount of counseling, and I don't mean academic counseling, I mean, what would you call it? Social emotional counseling? Wellness counseling that's available to students at the high school level?
I think our focus needs to be on a holistic approach to counseling, if I may. And my wife's a school psychologist, so I've got a little bit of insight on that, which is there's 3 or 4 different types of counseling, and I think we need to be really clear about what the school's going to provide and really what that means. A menu, I guess, is what I'd say, and the school district is working on that. I believe Ms. Damie Trowbridge is in charge of that, a school psychologist for the district. And what I mean is, when you say counseling, is it check-in, check-out counseling? Is it immediate crisis counseling? Is it long-term therapy? And then what are you determining as long-term? Is that 2 meetings a week for a month and then you're cycled off? Is it a check-in every other week and then a handoff to an outside mental health professional? Is it referrals to Victor Counseling or through Medi-Cal? And so I think there already are these services taking place all the time. I thought what we really need to focus on, making sure our families and our students know what that menu is, so when they need something, they know who to go to try to get the correct service, if that makes sense, because we're also partnering with many other agencies in the county and other private sources as well. And so I think that's the task, is to weave the web of all those connective energies so it's very transparent to the students that need it. And I will give a shout out. Where's Miss Olson? Hi, Diane. So Diane's cutting through some really great, I think, red tape, because the hospitals, I know, they have protocols with their HIPAA laws. We have protocols with our HIPAA laws. And I think there's groups of professionals in the county that are meeting to try to create a significant sharing of information so we can get to the heart of this. Oftentimes when our students have mental health issues outside the school, we're not aware of that because it's up to the parent to either tell us or not tell us. So that's just an example of the effort not only going to bringing counselors, but really understanding what the role of each group in the community is and how to make sure that the parents see what each group's role is and how they can access that. I appreciate your patience in that. That was a long answer, but it's,
That's all right.
it's an issue that's on my mind, obviously.
We have a lot of money, pouring into the district. I mean, I want to say we have at least $45 million coming in. Isn't it more than that, though? I mean, it's.
With the original ESSER $1, it's over 50 million of one-time money.
So I feel that some of that money ought to go toward direct psychological wellness, direct benefit to students. I think we're in a dark time right now.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I'd also say that is happening. So I know on my own campus, I was given some funds, and I used some other funds to build a wellness center in my library that's going to be staffed with, I believe, Jay, I don't want to misspeak, but an extra 50% wellness counselor with the 50% I have now. So I'll have a full-time wellness professional actually in a wellness center 100% of the time next year. So I agree with you. Those are the types of things we need to do. But I would caution that we create a really, not as seamless, but as seamless of a plan as we have, and not just throw people at it, but really come up with a plan of how we're going to integrate resources.
Thank you.
If there's no further questions, thank you very much for your time.
That's the end of our presentation, so unless you guys have any further questions from our directors or myself.
Board Member Dalby, do you have any additional questions?
I don't, I have.
Well, I think we lost you.
I think she's making a motion that we go to school full-time.
Questions?
Ms. Dalby, if you could repeat that, please. You froze on us for a
No, I'm
second.
making a motion because that would be out of order. Yeah, I noticed some. I have questions about sort of of our students.
Could you repeat?
But they were not enough for me. I wouldn't make a motion at this time because that would be out of order.
Do you know what she said? Caitlin, I'm going to see if someone else understood what you asked. No?
I was like, my question was mostly answered.
Thank you, Caitlin.
President Robinson, we do have some speakers on this item.
I keep turning my button off. Excuse me, but I did gardening again, and my back is not happy with me. We are at the time for public input, and so, Mr. Shepherd, you're on.
President Robinson, how would you like to handle the order? We do have, for this item, we do not have any students signed up to speak, nor do we have staff. We do have parents, and as on my spreadsheet here, they're indicated by in-person and by phone.
Okay, I don't have the separation between in-person and phone, but I don't believe we would make a difference between in-person and a phone. Our criteria was that a speaker card was submitted by 12 o'clock.
Okay.
So that's the criteria that we will follow. If there are no students, then we'll move to...
Yeah, it's been randomized, so we will just go ahead and move through. If they are here in person, obviously step forward to the mic. If they are not here in person, then we'll make the phone call.
Okay. President Robinson, do we need to repeat the parameters for addressing the board?
I'm sorry, again?
Do we need to repeat the parameters for addressing the board? Time and how
Yes,
much time they have?
there's a 3-minute limit. We haven't had a number of speaker card requests that would take us beyond the allotted time that we set aside, so we're good there. Everyone will get their full 3 minutes. We have a yellow card for those that are here in person. I believe you have a bell for those that are on the phone to indicate 30 seconds left. At 3 minutes, you will be asked to suspend. So let's start with the random selection. What's first?
Our first speaker is Joe Kidd.
Joe Kidd is present. Thank you. Step to the podium, sir.
Hi, good evening. My name's Joe Kidd. I have 3 daughters attending Chico schools at Chico Junior and Chico High. I'm also a coach on the Chico High ski team. I'm here tonight to ask you open schools full-time and immediately. The information and the data available support this decision and override the insufficient reasons that have been given to keep schools partially closed. I run an operation with about 50 people who mostly do shift work, producing food. The last year has been difficult and inconvenient for our company and our employees. Working with a mask on all day while doing hard work is difficult. Putting in place stringent rules to comply with COVID is also difficult. Removing chairs from the break room and other modifications is inconvenient, yet we've remained open and have had 0 spread of COVID within our facility. It's also my understanding that we have had little or no spread of COVID at our schools due to similarly inconvenient and difficult decisions that have been made. At this point, our teachers have been vaccinated. Many of our neighboring school districts are open full-time. The CDC issued guidelines that make opening schools significantly easier. People are allowed to fly. We're allowed to eat in restaurants without masks on. Agricultural and food workers are producing food that all of us eat safely. Doctors and dentist offices are open and performing elective procedures. Yet we say it is inconvenient and too difficult to open schools. This reasoning is insufficient. While those of us lucky enough to have resources have been able to make arrangements to deal with our situation over the past year, many of our fellow citizens are not so lucky. When food production employees go to work, many of them have few options for their children who are cooped up at home with little instruction or supervision. Many working families and single parents find themselves in a similar situation, and yet we tell them that opening school will be inconvenient. The answer is insufficient. It may be true that schools should not be the place for receiving nutrition and for counseling, and perhaps we should have this debate, but now is not the time, and we're not going to solve this in Chico. Opening schools now will be difficult and inconvenient for some, and it will be a huge relief for many others. We saw tonight very clear data indicating that 78% of parents want elementary schools open, with a 40% participation rate. That's an incredibly high participation rate in a survey. That's real data. Yes, some of our kids will need to change their part-time jobs. Yes, some class schedules will be changed. And many of the most in-need children will return to full-time school where they desperately need to be. The price of inconvenience is well worth the reward. Finally, to say that we should not open because there are only 7 days left in the school year is an insufficient reason. It's true that there are only 7 weeks left, but these are no different than any other 7 weeks. Leaders are called on to make difficult decisions to support those most in need. The reasons to keep school closed are insufficient, and the reasons to open are overwhelming. Please do your part as leaders and open our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker number 2.
Our second speaker is Lisa Chambers. She's in person.
Lisa Chambers, are you present at the meeting this evening? I don't see Lisa Chambers.
Okay. Would you like me to call? Okay. I'm calling Lisa Chambers. Voicemail. Okay, the next speaker, Katie Vanderwall Cook. I'll be calling her. Hi, Katie. I'm going to put you on speakerphone. You'll be addressing the school board. Okay, if you hear a bell, it means you have 30 seconds left, okay? Go ahead, Katie.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I strongly support and advocate the school district staying the course with the AM/PM scheduling model for the short remainder of the school year. It would be incredibly unfair to the students to again upset their schedules. This, of course, doesn't even begin to address the huge upheaval of full-time in-person change would have on the students who have been distance learning for a full year. From a staffing perspective, how would playgrounds be staffed with supervision on such short notice with qualified candidates? This isn't easy to do during the best of situations. How will elementary cafeterias work? All of the children unmasking to eat in an enclosed space when the temps are too high in May to sit outside, or in the morning during breakfast when they're all in an enclosed area? Will distance learning students again be shifted into other classes, other teachers for the last remaining weeks of school? How will a new schedule affect the students that are receiving additional tutoring and thriving in a smaller classroom environment? Do we lose all of that newfound success for those students? Please continue with the AM/PM model. Stay the course, give our students some consistency, and continue and put the best effort into making our new school year in August the best it can possibly be for all of our students to come back in a successful, full-time manner. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Katie. Okay, our next speaker is in person, Matthew Thomason.
Sure, can all of you hear me? Okay. It's been over a year without proper instruction for our children. During that time, we have seen a systematic failure in our district to provide kids the learning environment they need. What are the facts? The facts are we have record numbers of learning loss. The grade letter F has quadrupled this school year. The kids most severely impacted are those we've warned about for months: English learners, foster kids, homeless, minority groups, lower socioeconomic status groups. There is so much learning loss that the district is having to use funds throughout the summer to help these kids catch up before next school year. And kids in the lowest grade levels have been most adversely impacted, as evidenced by the BPST scores. Another fact is that at least 2 children of CUSD has committed suicide since the fall. Scores of school-aged children have presented to Enloe Medical Center Emergency Department for attempted suicide, suicidal ideation, or significant depression. This does not even tell the whole story, because this does not include those seeking help at outpatient facilities. In reality, the crisis is much worse than we may ever know. These are the facts, and these are the results of repeated poor decisions by this board to keep our kids out of full-time learning. We can see in the survey results that 2/3 of all parents are in favor of returning to full-time instruction now. These are your constituents. You are here to represent them and the students, who have no other representation. The teachers have their union. We have no one else. While I'm on this topic, I understand that hearing from students about matters that affect their education is a noble idea, but policy should not be determined by their opinions, as their parents are their legal guardians and would know what is best for their child and their family. Speaking of students, they have struggled with the mental health crisis so much at Chico High that they have begun to organize themselves to bring awareness of such. What will it take for this board to listen to the medical and scientific community to believe what is happening right under their nose? The CDC and California Department of Public Health recommend schools returning to full-time. Medical, psychological, and pediatric associations across the country and the world recommend returning to full-time due to the negative consequences we have seen in this community. It is not enough to be stuck in cohorts where kids don't get to interact with their peers the same way as if they were full-time. And by the way, these recommendations stand even while variants of COVID-19 are spreading. So any excuse of not opening because of variants is completely unfounded and fear-mongering. I'd like to also remind everyone listening that every single school in our district, in our county, will be open full-time by next week, except for Chico Unified. While you may complain that we only have so many weeks of school left, and what's the point?
Thank you, sir.
I say saving one child from another suicide would make everything worth it.
Thank
and I
you.
say that
Your
your
time is
previous
up.
decisions are the exact failure in leadership that we have been mentioning over the previous months.
Okay, I'll next be calling Katie Muff. Voicemail. All right, our next speaker, I'll be calling Jessica Gianola.
Hello, Jessica. I'm going to put you on speakerphone. You'll be addressing the school board. If you hear a bell, it means you have 30 seconds left, okay? Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, board. Thank you for taking our calls. I wanted to voice my support for our model staying as is for the remainder of this school year, for the primary purpose of stability, really, whether or not COVID variances are emerging or not. COVID aside, just the amount of change that our students and families have had to go through is a lot. And move to full time, again, means that kids are losing out. And some of those services, those therapy services, my daughter will have to lose her speech therapist. So for the rest of the year, all the way until next school year, she'll be basically without any therapy because it'll take way too long to get reestablished, develop a relationship with a new provider before the end of school. And it's really seems to be more of a push, almost like a stubborn push from one side against the other. Let's make this happen before the end of the school year so we can save pride or whatever it might be, instead of thinking of the students. The surveys, I keep hearing the parent surveys quoting, what about the kids? I looked at the kids. The majority of children want to keep the same. That's who we should be listening to. They're asking, they put on the survey, please keep it the same. They're the ones that are impacted by this. So I think it's important that we weigh that. We think of the kids. The mental health aspect, I really hate that it keeps being abused with our school, in-person, non-in-person situations. Mental health, that exists all the time with everybody. And it's important that we have open conversations and that we commend our schools for putting more resources in place instead of bashing them like they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. And it's not a negative thing that they've recognized more opportunity to add more services. I thank them for it. We all should be thanking them for it. The parents should be doing what they can. The teachers are doing what they can. And we really should be working together, showing our students, our families, a good role model of how to make it through a pandemic in one piece together. Everybody's suffering. I don't know if that's 30 seconds for what. But anyway, I just support you guys. I know this is a hard position for the teachers, for the board, for the parents. The parents on either side, it's hard. But we're almost there, and we all look forward to the fall. We really do. And we should come together for that instead of more division until the very end. They have testing right around the corner. Let them focus on that. So, thank you.
Okay, our last speaker is in person, Arwen Funk.
Can you hear me? Thank you. So I have some prepared comments, but there's a few things based on tonight that I also need to say. I'm here to advocate for reopening for full-time in-person school. Really what we're dealing with here is that this board is holding on to the responsibility as if you are personally responsible for every child or staff member or whoever within our district that contracts a virus. And it's an absurd premise. It doesn't make any sense, and it never did. It didn't exist before COVID, and it's an unreachable goal to suggest that you can keep every person safe. We've been here an hour and a half, and almost every single bit of the conversation was a yeah, but, trying to deal with every little detail. And as Matt pointed out, every other district or school in our district has been able to find a way around it. And when the Bidwell principal spoke, I mean, it's clear that nobody here seems to know why they're all making it work, how they're all making it work. Why don't you know? That is something that we should know. If they're making it work, why don't we have that information of how they've done it? Why are we recreating the wheel? And to the parent who just talked about that we should give the kids a say in these surveys, I mean, I have great kids. I'm sure we'd all think our kids are great. I have an Eagle Scout, but if I let him choose his diet, he'd do nothing but drink Coke and eat salami all day long. So I'm not really sure that that's a great idea either. People can manage the disruptions and discomfort in their lives for a period of time, but it's cruel to inflict on them on a populace indefinitely. It makes no sense at all that everything else is opening safely. Other nearby schools, airlines, restaurants, the post office, sports, strip clubs, but our schools are still closed. It feels like we've got these two choices, these two sets of concerns that are warring here, and one of them is disruption and upset and difficulty with some logistics, which I get as a thing, but on the other hand, we've got this topic that nobody's talking about. I mean, two minor comments from our middle school and high school principals, but mental health issues, suicidality, you guys aren't discussing any of this. And I mean, the long-term destruction of our town, if our children are undereducated relative to our surrounding communities, how are they even gonna get jobs in the future? I mean, there's really long-term ramifications of the learning loss here. I hear the word disruption a lot tonight, and I think it's an important point to consider. It is not disruptive to return to normal. That's an unfair characterization. It's the calm after the storm. It's the blue sky at the end of a dark tunnel. It's an oasis in a desert. It's necessary and critical for a healthy existence that you let us go back to normal. Continuing to do this is what is disruptive.
Thank you, speakers. Mr. Tennis?
I'd be open to hearing from more speakers if the chair was amenable, or the president, Madam President, if you were amenable to taking
We've heard
people.
from all the speakers.
We've heard from all the speakers.
My time's not so precious that I can't hear what these people have to say.
Eileen?
Dr. Kaiser?
The only group that we didn't get to hear from that we had anticipated were students. So that's the only additional comments that I'd be willing to hear.
Do we have any students in the audience? We have two. Could we have a pro and a con on the students? Do you? Okay, step up to the microphone, please.
My name is Acacia Pema Fellner, and I am a junior at Chico High School. And I am here on behalf of students, parents, teachers, and the community, and those we have lost to suicide this year. I'd like to briefly touch base on saying that I believe high school students should be separated from middle school and junior and elementary school for going back going back full in-person school. It would not be beneficial for high school students to go back in the little time that we have. And then I would also like to say that we need to be more supported as students. We are struggling and we're desperate with our mental health. As you see, we've lost many students this year and a teacher, and I cannot tell you how many I've lost count that are struggling that I've heard from personally. We would like to request more funds go to the wellness center that is on our campus that has been built. We need more school therapists, not counselors preparing us for college, but more on-school psychologists and therapists. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next student, please.
Hi, my name's Kylie Karoulis, and I am a junior at Chico High. I'm here on behalf of my peers to give the board a point of view from the students. A lot of us believe that we need more mental health or wellness funding to have someone to immediately talk to. When students go to the office, they often get told to make an appointment, which isn't helpful for someone having an immediate crisis. Also, when we email our counselors, we're not always guaranteed a response within the time we're having that crisis. This is why we need the Wellness Center and why we need more funding. I heard Mr. Williams say that we have two half wellness counselors. If we put more funding to hiring more kids could feel more prioritized and heard, and feel that they could go there and actually feel welcome, and not that they're wasting someone's time or that they're unwelcome. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're still checking the speaker requests. One moment.
So we do have two names that are under 4.2.1, Mary Kate Benson and Danny DeMio. And then Katie Vanderwall under 4.2.3. So were those people that are here?
Did someone submit under the wrong agenda item number?
Superintendent Staley, I did text Katie Vanderwall Cook to confirm that she wanted to speak to the budget item, and she does.
Okay.
I mean, it's only a couple of people. I don't know why we can't let them be heard.
I understand, sir, but we do follow protocol whenever necessary. We have a structure that, that keeps things flowing, and we're double checking to make sure we haven't screwed up to keep someone from speaking.
Is there a Jordan Colby?
Jordan Colby?
Okay.
Yes, there is a Jordan Colby. I'm going to step to the microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Jordan Colby. I'm a parent of 3 children, junior high and younger. Why change now? We only have 8 weeks left. Well, if my kids had 1 week of school left, I'd want it to be full-time because it would be 3 times more school in 1 week. Every day matters. That is why this is important. Well, what about the new variants? They might be more contagious and dangerous to kids. Do we have any solid data on that? Do we actually know that? It's not wise to make decisions on things we don't know. So how about we stick to what we know? We know full-time school can be done safely because there are scientific studies that demonstrate it. We can also see Durham, Moreland, and parochial and charter schools within Chico offering full-time education because they decided it was important to give these kids a high-quality educational experience. What is Chico Unified trading these kids opportunities for? Nobody knows what we're getting out of this. Are we lowering community spread by cutting our kids' school hours? Probably not. The literature certainly wouldn't support that conclusion. Can we start making decisions based on things we actually know? That's informed decision making. Here's one thing we know for sure. We know the vaccine works really, really well. High quality, peer-reviewed scientific literature shows it. We need to stop pretending that the vaccine doesn't matter. It matters more than any other modality we've used in this pandemic. The scientific data for masking and social distancing pales in comparison to the high-quality evidence for vaccination. In the Pfizer and Moderna trials, severe COVID was prevented in all subjects. Nobody died from COVID in a vaccinated individual. That was a powerful treatment effect, and that's why unions and for educators across the country lobbied to place educators in Tier 1B for vaccination. Placing teachers at the top of the list was the right decision. I see teachers working hard. This catastrophe is absolutely not on them. But saying that their job can be done remotely is minimizing the important work that they do with our kids. Their jobs are essential to the development and education of our children. That's why we vaccinated our teachers in February. The families of Chico Unified have been patient, but we are suffering. It is a moral failure of this board that we have not progressed beyond the bare bones educational model being offered. Families are leaving Chico Unified because this board has created an educational island where the children within our district are being denied the quality education offered all around us. The modification of spacing guidelines is a golden opportunity to do the right thing for the families and children of Chico. Do the right thing and place the education of these kids and the mission of Chico Unified School District at the forefront of the decision you make tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Have we identified another, no, we are at the end of our
Yeah, we did have one that we're going to do a phone call on that we may have had the wrong phone number on. I'm not sure
Okay.
if John had the wrong phone number or not, but
Okay, we'll try the number again here. I'm calling Katie Muff.
Hi, Katie. I'm going to put you on speakerphone. You'll be addressing the board. If you hear a bell, it means you have 30 seconds left, okay?
Hi, my name is Katie Muff. I have 3 children at Chico USD. I worry about what message we are sending our CUSD children when so many things are opening up, but our schools don't continue to progress towards a more normal day of school. When a child can now go to a movie theater, travel on an airplane, spend time indoors, unmasked with elderly family, but can't go to a full day of school, we send a message to our young, impressionable youth that it is not important. Many children get a sense of purpose from working hard at school and being part of the school community, but not returning to a full day as soon as it is safe to do so, we take that away from them. Many children have spent this year feeling they lack purpose, and more time away from school only exacerbates this. A loss of purpose leads to apathy, failing grades, depression, and suicides. I hear many argue we shouldn't change for just 6 weeks, but added to 10 weeks of summer and 56 weeks since the shutdown, not returning to full day now puts CUSD students at not seeing a full day of school for 72 weeks. If you can remember what almost a year and a half feels like for a child, you can empathize with the hope and relief a 6-week return would bring. This vote to return to as normal a school day as we can currently provide shouldn't weigh on logistical challenges. It should be based on reinstating our CUSD children's right to a full day of education now that it is both safe and possible, and as a direct result, also children's sense of purpose. Everyone has a constitutional right to a full day of education, and you as the board were elected to protect this right for all of our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Board, do we have a motion relative to this item? Dr. Kaiser?
I'd like to move that we return to full-time school at the beginning of fall semester.
I'm still going to rule that motion out of order.
Well, you just said a motion.
Yes, I did. I asked for a motion. The appropriate motion at this point would be to suspend the rules in order to reconsider the decision we made February 3rd.
Someone would have to
Right,
raised that as an issue. Nobody has yet.
right. And if no one raises it, we move on to the next agenda item. Hearing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Thank you, Board. Let's take a 5-minute break. You are welcome to continue to attend the meeting and see the rest of the agenda. We'll take a 5-minute break. Board. Our next item is the discussion action item authorization for external use of Chico High School CUSD facilities. Julie Kissel, Facilities Construction Manager. You're up, Julie.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you. I'm really pleased to bring this item to the board this evening. It's a small step in a positive direction for our community. And I'd like to mention that toward the end of the lead sheet, we talk about the Center for the Arts and inside theater use. And I just wanted to mention that since the writing of this lead sheet over the Easter weekend, actually, the guidance put out by CDC has changed for indoor theater use already. So I just wanted to inform you that in the orange tier, which is what we're in now, capacity, first of all, indoor use of theaters is allowable, but capacity is limited currently to 15% of the capacity of the building or 200 people. And that increases to 35% of capacity if all guests are tested or show proof of full vaccination. So I just wanted to let you know that we plan to open up the theaters in the district for inside use according to these regulations, although it seems like there'll be small groups of participants.
Julie, can you
go ahead.
repeat the?
I'm sorry, which part, Dr. Kaiser?
The part about the change and how many can be, allowed in?
Yes. In the orange tier, capacity is limited to 15% of the
okay.
facility's capacity or 200 people. So no more than 200.
Okay.
That capacity can be increased to 35% if all guests are shown to be fully vaccinated or test negative for the COVID virus.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking. So this is a lengthy lead sheet, and I won't go through all of the items. I'd open it up to questions. If the board has any questions about any particular facility and how it will be opened up for external use.
Julie, this is President Robinson. On the elementary school sites, when you talk about reservations, is that for the schools that have gymnasiums or other classrooms that could be used after school, or is that for field use? Is the field use still first come, first served with no reservation at elementary sites?
Yes, it is. And Ms. Robinson, this is only for outdoor use. So that would apply to the elementary school fields and blacktops, that they're open, first come, first serve, unless a reservation is put into place. So outside user groups can reserve elementary school blacktop areas and elementary school field spaces if they desire to.
Thank you. Board, do you have any
If I
other
could just,
questions?
I'm sorry. I was just going to add that the focus here, if you look, the available times for outside use are very diminished from now through June 30. And that is really simply because of the really extensive use of our own facilities for our own programs for the remainder of this year. So this is a stopgap. It's for implementation from now through the end of through June 30, through the end of the year. And then hopefully we're in a position where we can fully open and be back to normal. But just again, as a focus, this is really for that short period of time where we're really going to be very impacted for our facilities, for our kids and our programs.
Thank you. Dr. Kaiser?
I know we're not going to have any playoffs in And football. But do we have other spring sports that might actually be competing for playoff time surfaces?
No.
Okay.
No, the CIF has not supported any playoffs.
Right. That's what I thought, but when you said competition, I was, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tennis?
Would it be premature to make a motion?
Do we need, it says, oh, okay,
President
because
Robinson.
we are approving the guidelines, so yes, it is appropriate to make a motion.
President Robinson may interrupt.
Yes.
We have two community speakers.
Oh,
Public
I'm
comment.
sorry.
Thank you. I'm going to call Mary Kay Benson.
Hi, Mary Kay. I'm going to put you on speakerphone. You'll be addressing the school board. If you hear a bell, it means you have 30 seconds left, okay? Okay, go ahead.
Hello, school board. I'm calling on behalf of North State Shelter for All, and we wanted to be able to present a proposal to you all, having our spokesperson, Charles With-Yoon, present it. And this would be in conjunction with some of your unused property and having it be used for sanctioned campgrounds for homeless children and their mothers and families if needed on some of your property that you have control over. And I believe Charles With-Yoon has sent you a proposal about that. And unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight, but I thought I would just try to ask you if you are open to that, if he could make a short presentation at your next meeting, and that we could tell you all about it. We would be providing all of the services, the porta potties, the hand washing stations, the trash bins, the pickups, monitoring it, that kind of thing. So it would just be a matter of, if you've been following the news, we have a homeless crisis, even if the city doesn't believe it, and we just need some land use. And so that's basically what I wanted to ask, if you would just consider listening to a presentation and putting it on the agenda.
Mary Kay, thank you. I think I would suggest referring you to Mr. Baltima so that you can discuss with him your issues about availability so that you have accurate information in order to proceed with your request. Mr. Baltima, we have her phone number. Would you be in contact with Ms. Benson?
Yes, I will certainly call Ms. Benson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary Kay.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm calling Danny DeMeo.
Hi, Danny. You'll be addressing the school board. I'm going to put you on speakerphone. If you hear a bell, it means you have 30 seconds left, okay? Okay, go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, thank you everyone for your time. My name is Danny DeMeo, and I'm the president and head coach of the local nonprofit running club, the Chico Striders. It's our mission to introduce the sport of running to our youth with a focus of track and field and in the spring and cross country in the fall. We primarily serve kids from the age of 6 to 14 years old. When our, sorry, I'm mute my computer. Sorry, I had a little feedback there, I apologize. When our kids graduate from PV and Chico High, they're directly, when our Striders enter high school, they graduate from our club and they join the high school programs. Both PV and Chico High are directly seeing the positive influence from our club on both the number of athletes and developed talent. Kevin Gert and Vince Phillips can attest to this. Track is a spring sport and is set to kick off April 12th. Simply, we can't have a track season without a track. I'm very proud to say that I want you to know that our coaches are 100% volunteers and committed hundreds of hours to our Striders. We have also raised funds over the years to pay for operational costs in order to remove all barriers for our kids to enter the sport of running. And Chico Unified School District continues to leave the fields closed. We will need to utilize both Paradise and the Durham facility. This presents a significant disadvantage to the kids who do not have transportation. Additionally, running presents a low exposure of health risk in our current COVID environment and liability for the district. Chico Striders is a fully insured with the district as well as an additional insured in the policy. Please help us by changing your policy and allowing external use of the facilities to not only baseball fields but also the track. Please remove the only barrier left in the way of fostering an equally healthy lifestyle and love for the sport of the community. I appreciate everyone's attention to this matter and consideration for this position. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Mr. Tennis, I believe you have a motion to be made.
I move that I don't know exactly how to craft my motion, but that guy that just called in, Danny DeMayo, it's a great program. And all they would do, is want to use the track to run around, it's a great program. We like cross country. We've discussed informally. I don't know if we've ever discussed it formally, but it's a less expensive activity, sport, and it's really popular nowadays. And a lot of kids really benefit from that Strider program. It's a really awesome program, and I think that we should figure out a way to enable them to use tracks so that kids can participate in it. Because right now the program's kind of shut down.
I have a question. If the activity that Mr. Tennis is speaking of fits within the guidelines we're about to pass, that would make it available.
So that was what I was going to ask Julie, and Mr. Boltman can jump in as well. I believe there were some reasons based on internal use that the tracks in particular were not available until at least late in the evening. Julie, can you clarify that, please?
Yes, certainly. We would love to be able to open up the stadium facilities for external use, but as you all know, we have multiple sports for our high school students on top of each other. We're doing fall and spring sports all at the same time. So the stadium is in use every day, Monday through Saturday, all day long. And in the guidance that we've provided for your review tonight, we would only be opening it, the stadium, which includes the track, between the hours of 8 and 10 p.m. on weekday evenings and Saturdays and Sundays when available. I guess the opportunity for the Striders would be on Saturdays and Sundays if available.
Mr. Landau, I'll see you, Dr. Kaiser, you'll be next.
A question for...
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Okay.
A question for Julie or Kevin. Are there any other... We've talked about the stadium. Are there other tracks? I'm not sure exactly what the Striders' needs are. Do we have other facilities at other sites that we might be able to open to them?
Without talking with them, I'm not exactly sure what would be required. Mr. Tennis, you might have a better idea.
I can speculate. My son, my oldest, went through Striders. Great program. But basically, I can't speak for him. I'm sure he'd be available if we wanted to call him. But no, they meet and they go through running drills and stuff like that. I mean, I think, weren't we talking about some old track or something like that on some campus, like within the last meeting or two? I mean, those might be viable, possibilities. If there are any old, Julie Kissel, are there any older tracks, non-stadium running tracks out there in the Chico Unified School System?
Our Chico Junior High and Bidwell Junior High, as well as some of our elementaries, have granite tracks. So they're not running tracks that are, surface like our high schools, but they're utilized for elementary and junior high PE.
It's across,
And-
oh, sorry, it's a cross-country focus.
Then that's something we'd want to speak with them about and see if those are options that would be viable. The challenge, as Julie mentioned, is on the stadiums with just the number of our own students. But those other facilities may, if they fit their needs, be available per this guidance.
So as a university cross-country and track coach, most of the universities use, Chico, they do use the park and use that running surface because there's no traffic for periods of time and it is flat. So I think it's very clear that we can't interfere with our own groups who are, we pull up here and there's 5 different teams out there, practicing. But certainly the Bidwell Park, we have had all kinds of meets there, and cross-country has their meets there. So it may be that they're just unaware of some of the other areas that have, but those tracks aren't measured, and that's part of the sense of it, so anyway.
I think I would encourage you regarding this guidance would allow us to engage these outside organizations and have a conversation if the times available to them would fit their programs and allow our staff to then schedule them while also maintaining the time for our own programs. So at least it allows us to have those conversations with our outside groups because it's not completely closed. It just means that we have earmarked some time that effectively we can manage.
Dr. Kaiser?
I would like to move 4.2.1.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion?
I just would like a quick point of clarification.
Yes, Tom.
So I think I heard you say that passing this without any changes will allow us to engage with the group that just spoke to us and see about using our other facilities for them, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to call for the vote. Member Dalby, are you out there? Are you ready for vote? Caitlin?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry.
Okay, we're calling for a vote on approving the facilities use guidelines for the rest of the year until June 30th, I believe. How say you?
Aye.
Dr. Kaiser?
Aye.
Mr. Tennis?
Tennis, aye.
Lando, aye.
Robinson, aye. It passes 5-0. Okay, next up. Okay, we have the Chico High School Architecture Career Technical Education Project. Yay, team. Julie Kissel?
Thank you. This is an exciting project over at Chico High School, one of our career and technical education grants. And as you know, we have already completed the first phase of the project, which is the greenhouse over at the Ag Department. And the second phase is to modernize the 2 agriculture classrooms and to add a shade structure outside for the welding program. At the time that we put the lead sheet together, the project had not yet bid. However, it did bid on April 1st, and we got 5 impressive bids, and the low bidder is Hankins Group for $450,000. You see that the construction budget that we're asking you to approve this evening is for $700,000, and that includes the portion that you previously approved for the greenhouse. So tonight, we are asking you to review and approve the project to move forward with Hankins Group as the general contractor. Thank you.
Julie, have we had any additional staff fall through the roof at the greenhouse at Chico High?
No, we have not.
Oh, good. I'm going to move approval of the awarding of the the bid.
Second.
Any further discussion, board? Ms.
Julie,
Dahl-
Julie, can you spell the name of that contractor?
Yes, it's Hankins, Hankins. And we have worked with them previously. That part of their group is an electrical company, and they've done many projects for us in that electrical capacity. However, they are a general contractor, and this is our first project with them as a general.
Thank you. Board Member Dalby, are you ready for vote? And how say you?
I vote aye.
Dr. Kaiser? Mr.
Tennis,
Tim?
tennis, aye.
Aye.
Oh, Robinson, aye. I'm sorry, I'm still giggling from, for those of you that don't know, we had a staff member at Chico High fall through the roof of the old greenhouse facility. He was hurt pretty badly. Okay, our next item, I'm sorry, that passed 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. The next item, Mr. Baltima.
Yes, so we're bringing forth a document, and we're really calling our planning document related to the COVID one-time funds. And in the top right-hand corner, we've summarized the available new dollars. And again, as a reminder, these are one-time in nature. We have the ESSER $2 at $10 million, the AB 86 in-person instruction grants at 3.7, the AB 86 expanded learning opportunities grant at 8.1 million. Both of those AB 86 are state dollars. And then now the ESSER $3, additional 22.3 million. So for a total of $44 million just in the new money that's going to be coming into us. At our last meeting back in March 3rd specifically, the board took action on the items that are grayed out. The furniture for social support distancing at the elementary level, class size reduction, the MTSS coordinator, and then elementary counselors for 2 years. What's included in this spreadsheet also is we're still categorizing the expenditure through the MTSS categories, which is consistent to what Ed Services is doing, is it's looking towards its implementation of the educational program. And then we've also added the number of years in which we would use these one-time dollars. And we have the current year, next year, 2022, 23, and then we've included 22, 23, 24 because there is some federal law that allows an additional year of expenditure. So we do believe for the federal dollars, ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, that we can spend those dollars out through the 2024 year. So we've included for planning purposes the benefits of these dollars over multiple years. So the list, we understand this is a very long list and very broad and quite frankly, maybe not fair to bring this to you tonight and ask you to vote on all of these items because you may have certain questions and it takes a little bit of time. When you start looking at, there's actually $50 million of budget allocation here. But our intention isn't to ask you to vote on all items. What we are asking you this evening is to take a look at these, certainly ask any questions. We intend to bring this list back to you on April 21st. However, there are some items here that if we want to start addressing some student loss and some of the conversation we had earlier, we would recommend to the board consider taking action this evening to approve these allocations. And an example would be the full-time equivalent intervention teacher for all the elementary school sites for an estimated cost of $2.5 million. The reason we might ask you to approve this evening is it allows us to start recruiting for these teaching positions right away, if this is something, in fact, we want to implement. So we identified those items that we felt have a time imperative that you might consider taking action on this evening in green, and most of them are related to staffing, and anything that has a longer timeline for purchase. And just the total of all the items in green is listed at the bottom at $12.831 million.
Repeat what you just said, please, the last little line.
Yes, the total for all the items listed in green, which we would ask the board consider taking action on this evening for allocation, totals $12,831,000, and that is all the items in green.
I do want to point out that we have in there the additional counselors to support mental health. We have MTSS, as well as wellness counselors and TCM extra assignment to increase student support. So some of the themes that we've been talking about this evening are included here.
Mr. Landau,
And
Dr.
in fact-
Kaiser, you'll be next.
In fact, I wanted to address exactly that. I understand that we want to fill these positions as quickly as possible. So when thinking about the mental health support positions and the intervention teachers, if we approve this today, are we looking at hopefully filling these positions? Are we looking at summer next year or right away? I mean, what's the timeline for getting someone in these positions?
So that's a good question. So, and that's why it is important to approve them as soon as possible, because we're competing with all the other school districts in the area for the same people. If we get approval tonight, we open the positions. We typically will open for 2 weeks and then have interviews shortly after that. We can move fairly quickly.
So it's potential that we could increase staffing at the wellness centers and potentially increase some of the, potentially offer some of the immediate crisis response counseling that our student speakers are talking about?
Well, unknown. A lot of the people that are in these positions are under contract for the remainder of this year, so we will at least be hiring starting next year. I couldn't guarantee that we could get the quality of people that we need immediately for this year, because they're typically going to be working somewhere else. It's possible if some of them have already graduated and they're just looking for that first position, and we do hire some of those folks. But especially important for hiring for next year, because this is the hiring season that we're competing with all the other school districts for.
I understand that. I don't know if there's a way within the hiring process, I presume there's not, to emphasize people who might be available now. I really think we need to listen to the students who spoke here earlier about an immediate need for a ramp up in crisis services.
I understand that. It will be a challenge. A lot of school districts are doing the same thing, and the folks that are properly credentialed in the counseling areas are going to be at a premium. So that's important for us to be hiring now before, or at least during the same time the other districts are. So
On that note, are we only looking for PPSs, or are we thinking about social workers and LCSWs and MFTs and that kind of thing as well?
Yes, definitely the latter.
Okay.
At the current time, we have our properly credentialed counselors for academic areas, and they're only required by law at the high schools. They're not required by law at the elementary and the junior highs, because they're not advising for college preparation and that type of thing. So we were definitely looking for those other areas, licensed social workers and MFTs.
Thank you.
Member Dalby has her hand up. Sorry, Dr. Kaiser.
That's okay. You can go to Dr. Kaiser first.
Kathy,
I want to move 4.2.3, and if I get a second, I'll speak to it.
Point of order.
Yes. Member Dalby?
We were still in we were still in discussion. Madam President has not asked for a motion yet. So I'm going to ask my question.
Yes, we also
on
have
the-
speakers waiting.
Oh, you have online
Yeah,
speakers
so-
waiting? Okay.
Thank you. Member Dalby, if you could.
Just a friendly reminder for the board that we should be waiting for Madam President to ask for a motion and raise our hand, and then present our motion. My question is, on this document, is this whole list, I'm assuming it's all totaled at the bottom, and shown like how much is that? Is it still within the amount that we will have to spend, or are there things on this list that we're going to have to pick and choose to take off the list because we can't spend all of it
That's a good question.
eventually?
Yes, that is a good question. There is almost $51 million of ideas and programs listed here. And as we noted above, there's only about $44 million of available revenues. So yes, there is some prioritization that would need to occur. But what we would specifically ask for this evening, and again, noting that this is a lot for the board to take in at one time, I would recommend that the board target or focus in on those items that are in green that we believe have some timeline imperative to implement, and then bring this back on April 21st to then have that further prioritization conversation to whittle this down to fit within that $44 million of available revenue.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Landau?
One more quick clarification question. I see one of the items in green is a PBIS lead in the amount of $5,000. Is that a stipend? Thank you.
Ah, yes, I see. Does any board member have any questions about any of the items marked in green?
I do.
Yes, Mr. Tennis.
How would you propose working it, Kevin? I'm hearing Mr. Landau sort of have favorable things to say about the idea of maybe increasing what we're looking at for wellness therapy. He's free to whack me or something like that if I'm reading that incorrectly. How would we do that if we wanted to take stick a toe in the water there?
Well, certainly the board has the authority and discretion to direct and provide allocation amounts that may be different than this. What I might suggest, since this is a lot of information at one time, one, I would focus in on just those items in green if you felt that those were appropriate to approve to move forward. We could get started then. And then when we come back on the 21st, really have a better idea of what you think the priorities are, or if you want to add to a certain item, we could do it at that time. One recommendation I would make to the board is that we don't allocate all $44 million, quite frankly. I actually might recommend that we shoot for something like $35 to $38 million, holding some of those dollars back for things that we are not seeing yet. And quite frankly, getting more feedback as we go down the line from our school sites. So I'm taking a long time to answer your question, Mr. Tennis, but I think from a program standpoint, if you want to change the amounts in green and felt comfortable in that area, that's what I would recommend for this evening. And then we will bring this back on the 21st, really, for kind of a full review.
So I should propose a number change on that? Is that what you just said, maybe?
I think that's totally
okay,
appropriate.
so I'd say maybe to triple what's in place now, which is a half of an intervention counselor right now at each high school site.
We're also adding, we put on there, adding an extra counselor above the wellness counselor too on there. So you'll see secondary gets we're proposing another counselor above the halftime wellness counselor.
Like an academic counselor, right?
It does not have to be, no. Just like we said, we're expanding what we're asking for our counselors to be able to do.
There was also the, one of the students brought up the issue of the wellness center. There was and that person, I was in a meeting with her on Monday, and they weren't of the opinion on Monday that there was a wellness center at Chico High. They called it the back room, they called it. But they said that they thought they needed a wellness center. So I think maybe we're thinking we've got one thing, but they, at least Monday, they weren't thinking we had that. So is there money in here that could, one thing also that she said, or one of them said, was that, I've heard this, is like they feel like they're not in a private environment, right? So they feel like maybe they've heard staff talking about other students in a way that they thought was inappropriate. Who knows exactly what transpired, but I imagine a perfect little place where a student goes to check into a, like a conversation with a Chico Unified staff member, and it's a private environment, and maybe they're known by name, and if you really had a crisis, it would be a place where you could go to have a conversation with somebody that you could signal,
Yeah, absolutely. And we have heard that loud and clear in meeting with our students during our student LCAP meetings this year, that they really want a more confidential way to reach out to help from their counselors. And so, that is certainly something that we're working on. Now, the Wellness Center at Chico High is designed to do exactly that. And Mr. Williams has money to do that. It is still in development. It is not done yet. It is still under development. So that's probably why the students, aren't familiar with it by that term yet.
And Mr. Tennis, I haven't run this by Mr. Shepard, but I was talking to a person from Butte County Behavioral Health. One of the things we got started on this one, students told us that they needed that, as Ms. Staley's saying. But we have, a few of us have visited a wellness center at down in Fresno. Clovis North has a beautiful section where they have their academic counselors one area, then they have a wellness center. So we're going to be planning on taking some assistant principals and counselors down to look at their center. So we have a baseline, because again, they have a center where the kids can go in, where they have a counselor, they have interns from the universities nearby, and then they also have peer seniors that work with the younger ones. And again, I really want people to see that. I've seen that in person, and it's pretty well. And so we'll be taking people down there to make sure we're developing these centers the proper way.
Yeah, and if I could just add, if you look at the spreadsheet under line 51, it references whisper rooms. The idea is that these are rooms, and we have already installed these in a couple of our locations at some of our elementary schools. They are enclosures that can be installed in classrooms or in office spaces, and they do provide a confidential space for counseling. So that has been a consideration. It wasn't listed here as a time priority because they're readily available. So if we bring this back on the 21st, and that is still something that the board would like to support, we can easily get those before the start of the next school year.
Okay, I'm following Mr. Tennis's inquiry. In what we have in green, could we make an increase to that line item without presenting, it wouldn't present any difficulties, because it's within the parameters of the money that's available in this first approval tonight. Do we need to do it in order to begin to accomplish what Mr. Tennis and other board members are asking?
For staffing, we need to, if we are hiring positions, we need to be out looking right now and interviewing now.
May I?
I thought I was next. Dr. Kaiser?
So I want to caution us about putting too many structural implications on this, especially in terms of the services. The city has run into this. Behavioral health has run into this. It's very, very complex, and what we provide, as somebody, I think it was Doug said, it's a check list of potential services, but it's not what someone might perceive as full-time or in-depth counseling. That takes over a long period of time. I think everybody is drawn to the same issue of the kids that are struggling that we know about, but I do think that in this context, and Kelly both referenced it, time is of the essence. We are in an extremely competitive situation with very limited professionals available to us in this area. And I think all the high schools and junior highs around us are having some of the same consequences. So I'd rather see us think about moving this forward by approving it, and then as you find more contextual frameworks that you can explain to us? I mean, Jim's already said it's a 2-week. We have to post for 2 weeks, so we can't do anything, till we get that out there. Then we would have a lot better idea of the kind of people available to us, but also if we can go see something that appears to be very successful in a high school environment, that would be also really good. So I just feel like if we start to try to fine-tune this too much now, we're losing really valuable time.
But they say that we need to get out there and start hiring if we're going to do it. And if some of us look at this line item and we feel like it needs to be a little bigger, we need to let them know tonight. And so it warrants a conversation about upping it.
Thank you.
Mr. Lando?
Thank you. Perhaps then instead of getting into a big debate over what number that should be, that when we instead simply authorize staff to make offers beyond the amount here if we find the candidates. Instead of saying, hey, you can only spend another 100,000, say, you've got this much already. If we find 3 great candidates who are extra, go ahead and you have pre-authorization to just make those offers as well.
I would second that motion.
I think that flexibility helps us. There's no guarantee that there's quality candidates out there in the numbers that we need. Hopefully there is, but if they are, we don't want to lose them either. So I think that's great flexibility.
And the other challenge with this is that these are one-time dollars. So we're going to be creating a service that we will not be able to continue past 3 years. So it's a challenge. We certainly know this is an issue to address COVID. That's what these dollars are for. I just want to continue to point out that there is a point where this will end because we just do not have the ongoing resources to support this type of program. So.
And also what we're looking at right now is possibly 17 to 18 counselors that we'll be looking to hire just on what we've approved already.
We're not at the point to call for a motion yet, Board. We have speakers waiting to address the board. Oh, Caitlin, did you have an inquiry?
Just really quickly, with that topic, just one last question about it. Would it be, or maybe I missed this in the discussion with clarity, possible to fly those positions for next year and say, leave it open to possibly sooner if the right candidate fits or something like that, with the idea that we can fill that wellness center position sooner than later, or, wherever it may need to be, if we can do it, in 2 weeks rather than wait until next year, along with that flexibility. Is that something that's possible?
Yes.
I see heads nodding that yes, if we have the right person, you can modify the start date.
Okay. And I'm not sure if that's something that would need to be like board directed or approved. I just wanted to clarify that. And then just a friendly teacher reminder, Mr. Voltema, we love growth mindset around here, and I would love to think that if we establish a really good program, wellness and mental health program in our schools, that those programs aren't going to go away. We're just going to have to find different funding for them in the future. So I'm going to think positively about those programs and assume that we're going to get to work in finding how to fund those further into the future.
Thank you. We're good.
Did you call for a motion?
No, we have speakers waiting, Dr. Kaiser.
I thought, but you had said them.
Yeah, no, I was putting them on hold.
Okay, I'm calling Katie Vanderwall Cook.
Speakerphone, if you hear a bell, it means you have 30 seconds left, okay? Go ahead, Katie.
Hello again. Concerning the budget, I'm asking that funds be allocated to support our distance learners that will be returning to school campuses in August. I would like to encourage the school board and superintendent to plan an early return to school of a couple days for the students who have been distance learning this past year. They're going to need a bit of additional time to adjust to being on campus with large groups of students and working in collaborative environments again. This time could be used for team building, social emotional outreach, as well as campus support and working as a team, such as doing a group mural at school or a library project, as well as team building sport to help them all adjust to being together. This will also help to forge some new friendships, as many haven't seen their school friends in a year or more. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the only speaker I have on this item.
I thought we had two. Thank you. Okay, now, board, we are in a position to ask for a motion. Dr. Kaiser.
I so move the passing of 4.2.3.
Mr. Dennis?
I'd like to propose a friendly amendment that we,
Point of order. Well, I completely agree with the spirit of what you're doing. I believe we need to have a second.
Second.
To put the motion on the floor before we can amend it.
Yes.
So either you and I can second that, and then we can amend it.
I'll second the motion, and then I'll ask for a friendly amendment. And that friendly amendment would be to increase authorization for staff to hire above what is listed here in the category of student wellness up to 3 times the amount shown.
Dr. Kaiser, will you accept the amendment?
I don't see that as friendly. I think it puts us where we don't really know what the rest of our financial resources might be, since Kevin just encouraged us to think of the actual amount committed right now is in the 30 million, right? What, 35?
Well, the items listed in green total 12.8 million. And
Oh, okay.
again, we bring it back to you. We'll probably ask for, an allocation up to around
Right.
35, 37 million.
So I would really encourage us to wait till we come back and we start having an idea of where these money barriers or money issues might arise.
Okay, I'm going to call for a vote then on the
So,
original.
actually, I'd like to propose an amendment as well.
Oh, yes, Mr.
And
Landau.
this is not going to be a friendly amendment, I don't think, apparently, so I'm just going to ask to put the amendment up for a vote. I would like to amend the motion on the table to allow our staff to hire any qualified candidates to meet our immediate mental health wellness needs. And given the limited pool we're pulling from, I don't suspect you guys are going to go spend $20 million on counselors. So I would like to leave it to their discretion to hire any good candidates they can find, even if that does exceed the line item there.
I'll second that.
Yeah, I see that as a substitute motion with a second. Is there any discussion on the substitute motion?
Did you ask if there was a second on the substitute motion?
Yes.
Yes, I'll second that.
It has been seconded.
Oh, okay.
Huh?
My question, and I don't know about Caitlin, my question to Kevin would be, I'm not sure we got greater clarity about this. We've already indicated we want to take care of social emotional needs, so.
Actually, I think based on what the discussion I've heard from the board, and if it's recorded in the minutes, our understanding is that we will go out and try and recruit as many counselors as we can, and if that $1.5 million is not enough, we would bring back an estimate of new cost associated with that and increasing it at the time.
Here's where my clarification is. as many as we need, not what can. I mean, right? We know we have a specific framework that we have to operate in, but then, yeah, that would be a good clarification. Thank you.
The only clarification I would request is related to the motion. It just said pass, but was it specific to the items listed in green only?
Yes,
Yes, if I'm,
I believe that's the intent of
If-
both of them.
yeah, if I'm making a substitute motion instead of an amendment, then the motion would be to approve funding for the items listed in green on this spreadsheet with the change, as previously mentioned, to the amount we're authorizing for mental health and wellness hiring.
So just for clarification, for HR, I'm essentially doing a dual recruitment, one for the short term and then one for starting next year, because those may be different pools of groups of people that are available. So is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to call for the vote. Member Dalby?
Aye.
Dr. Kaiser? Yes. Mr. Tennis?
Tennis, aye.
Mr. Landau?
Aye.
I almost promoted you to Dr. Robinson, aye.
He's got that green shirt on with the
green shirt
surgical
on.
mask.
There we go. That passes 5-0. Thank you, members. Where are we on our agenda? Elementary, secondary schools, emergency relief. Are we on number 4? I'm sorry, yes, thank you. Mr. Baltima?
Yes, and this is really a perfect example of how quickly things are changing. When we brought the line items to you that were listed in gray that you approved for expenditure out of ESSER $2, it wasn't until the next day that we received ESSER 3 and the state AB $86 as well. So what we're requesting is that at that time, we earmarked those 5 expenditures specifically to ESSER 2. And we're asking that the board would consider unlinking those 5 items specifically from ESSER $2, because there are different timelines associated with these dollars. And now there's almost kind of we're going to have to do some accounting work to make sure, because we included the crosswalks in the other to prove that these items are addressing COVID-19. We're just requesting that we eliminate that direct link to ESSER 2 and allow us to spend this within ESSER 2, 3, or the AB $86.
Wow, I understand that.
The only last thing I want to add is, I did mention on the last item, but we will be very specific in the accounting of this related to the state's standardized accounting code structure, utilizing what they call goals and functions. So we'll be able to report how these dollars are being used, bring that back to you as the board and the community. So when you talk about wellness, we'll be able to report how many of those dollars, based on the allocation you made, we've actually spent and how those dollars were used. So we'll be very specific in the accounting so that we can do accurate reporting for you.
Okay.
This is the fun stuff.
Hey, Kevin, on a somewhat serious note, I want you to sort of remake a speech that you made a couple weeks ago. We have a lot of money coming in, right, from COVID relief. There's a state source of money and then federal sources of money. And you said something like, you had an interesting turn of phrase, like I almost want to say you can have whatever you want, but not quite that much or something. But how should we be thinking about this money that's coming in? Is there scarcity that we should be concerned about when we talk about hiring counselors for the kids in the midst of COVID, or should we not think in terms of scarcity for that purpose?
Well, I think the challenge is this is a large amount of one-time money, but by its nature, it's one time. So how do you effectively use the dollars, to address the learning loss and the social and emotional for those kids that need it because they've gone through this experience? And then how do you also leverage these dollars to give you multiple years of benefit? Because there's an opportunity to really create schools that we want to have and that we never really had the opportunity to do before. And so we're having conversations about outdoor shade structures and the concrete picnic tables that are going to be there for 25, 30 years. It really can shape what our schools look like in that way. HVAC systems, we'll bring more information about this, but we can really move our district in a much more forward advancement towards air quality, which is going to be an issue in the next year, 5 years, 10 years, related to just simply where we live. So I think to answer your question is, I typically use the term, we can be anything, but we can't be everything, because there's a limit. And I do appreciate Trustee Dalby's perspective of wanting to grow out of it, but there is a limit on the budget typically in any given year. In this case, my comment would be, we can be anything, and we really can be anything as long as we do it thoughtfully.
Permanent infrastructure is a really logical thing to invest in. So the wellness center, I mean, I don't know how much exactly we're pouring into that, but that seems like something that could be a really good use of this one-time money.
And I would really encourage the board to go through this list, and we'll bring it back to you on the 21st, and from a prioritization standpoint. But some of the things you just mentioned, getting many years of benefit out of these one-time dollars would be just a very, I think, effective use, a good stewardship use of these dollars.
We have had several reports now about the very high uptick in pollution due to the fires, very, very significant in our area, and with the mega drought we're in, likely to continue. So I think that issue about thinking about our air systems much more bigger or longer term than COVID, but this is a really critical issue for a lot of people. So anytime something that addresses an immediate issue can be extended long term, that's a huge benefit. We may have to do the same thing with our water systems with what they're talking about. So yeah, I agree.
Okay, board, do we have any public comment have come in? No, none. Then we are at a point where I'd ask if the board has any motions associated with this agenda item. Dr. Kaiser.
I move 4.2.4.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Member Dalby? Nope, she's shaking her head no. I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
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 Passes 5-0. Thank you, board. Okay, we have the approval of the student calendar under the Human Resources approval. Mr. Hanlon.
Okay, thank you. So each year I bring to the board your approval of the calendar that is 3 years out, and this just happens in April of each year. And we're looking at the 23-24 calendar. There's no significant changes or anything, even minor changes. It's very much very traditional start and end times, with the exception, just a reminder, we have 2 new board members. Last year we adopted the first calendar that ended on a Friday rather than a Thursday. To give you a little history, that dates back to us needing to share the stadium at Chico State because Chico High did not have a stadium to have a graduation in. So it always kind of ended on a Thursday, and that set the tone for the whole district. Well, that's not any longer necessary. We have a great stadium to hold a graduation, and it's much more friendly to our families who invite their family members in from out of town for the weekend rather than on a Thursday, which is much more difficult. So other than that, everything is very traditional. Holidays, holiday breaks, spring break, all those things are very traditional. So if you have any questions, I can answer those. And if for some reason you see something on this calendar that is not acceptable, we can certainly bring it back at the next meeting.
Board, Member Dalby, you have a question?
Yeah, just for clarification, because I feel like I remember voting on calendars before. Does this get passed by staff to discuss it all, or is it just something that gets kind of done internally and then shown to us?
So I do run it by both of the unions and ask for input. I also run it by Ed Services for input. So there's a lot of eyes that have been on this and input on the, for example, student conference days at elementary and those types of things. So it's not just me putting the calendar together. We have a lot of people that have input and opportunities for input on it.
Mr. Moretti, are you asking for input?
Well, actually, our contract says that the district will consult with CUTA, but since my wife and I don't agree on the calendar, to have CUTA come up with a consensus. So the way the district does it, where they put it out, ask for input from everyone, that is the consultation. So just so you know that they are following the contract.
Thank you, Mr. Moretti. Members, any
Thank
other?
you.
Caitlin, were you finished? Okay, members, do we have any more discussion? If not, we'll entertain a motion. Mr. Landau.
All right, I move the adoption of the 2023-24 student calendar as presented.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, none. It's unanimous. Thank you. Oops. Yes, board member request to agendize items is number 5 before we adjourn to closed session. I don't see any hands going up. Oh, Mr. Landau.
This is not so much a request to agendize as we heard from Mary Kay Benson earlier, and I just wanted to know if we had received that proposal from, Charles, was it Withen, I think? Wythen?
So I don't believe the district has received a proposal
Okay.
from Charles. I believe it went to Dr. Kaiser, and we have reviewed that. We have talked about whether or not that would be appropriate or not to agendize that item. And I think we're still doing some research with attorneys looking at whether or not that's even something feasible to do.
I'll leave that to you guys, and thank you.
Okay. Then I move that we move into closed session. Do we have any comments from anyone wanting to comment on closed session? Okay, seeing none, we are recessed to closed session. We will announce any actions when we are finished.
Yes, we'll need to move into the room. And then Ms. Dalby will make sure Erica gets you the phone number to call in.
Is there any way to drag a Chromebook in there and just let me zoom in on that too, or does it have to be by phone? I just don't know how good my phone's gonna be.
Okay. I'm going to guess the answer to that is yes. I'm looking at Mr. Vincent.
Okay.
Okay, we'll see you in the other room, Caitlin.
All right, thank you.